The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the organic wine company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.
The Thom Hartmann University Book Club today, we're reading from League of the Iroquois by Lewis Henry Morgan. This was first published in 1851, the same decade that Charles Darwin published Origin of Species. This was a big deal at the time. And when there were still, Iroquois to be talked with and whatnot. So this is, living the way that they were living. So this is from page 89, Structure of the League. This is just basically how the Iroquois Confederacy was put together in kind of an anthropological perspective. In connection with the power of the tribes to designate the sachems, those are the wise elders, should be noticed the equal power of deposition. If by misconduct a sachem lost the confidence and respect of his tribe and became unworthy of authority, a tribal council at once deposed him. And having selected a successor, summoned a council of the league to perform the ceremony of his investiture. Still further to illustrate the characteristics of the tribes of the Iroquois, some reference to their mode of bestowing names would not be inapt. Soon after the birth of an infant, the near relatives of the same tribe select a name. At the first subsequent council of the nation, the birth and name are publicly announced, together with the name and tribe of the father and the name and tribe of the mother. In each nation, the proper names were so strongly marked by a tribal peculiarity that the tribe of the individual could usually be determined from the name alone. Making as they did a part of their language, they were all significant. When an individual was raised up as a sachem, his original name was laid aside, and that of the sachemships was itself assumed. In like manner, at the raising up of a chief, the council of the nation, which performed the ceremony, took away the former name of the incipient chief and assigned him a new one, perhaps like Napoleon's titles, commemorative of the event which led to its bestowment. Thus, when the celebrated Red Jacket was elevated by election to the dignity of a chief, its original name, O Titai Nani I, always ready, was taken from him, and in his place was bestowed Sagoye Wat Ha, keeper awake, in allusion to the powers of his eloquence. Each tribe in the nation thus formed a species of separate community. The members of all were all of consanguinity, and all their relationships are easily traced. In like manner, those of the same tribe in each of the other nations were their consanguinee, and their relationships, near and remote, were also traceable. As two tribes were necessarily joined in each family, there was a perfect diffusion of tribes throughout the nation and throughout the league. So whenever somebody got married, they had to marry somebody from a different tribe. It's remarkable. In this manner, the race of the Iroquois, although consisting of different nations, was blended into one people. The league was in effect established and rested for its stability upon the natural faith of kindred. It now remains to define a tribe of the Haudenosaunee of the Iroquois. From the preceding considerations, it sufficiently appears that it was not, like the Grecian and Roman, a circular group of families, for two tribes were necessarily represented in every family. Neither, like the Jewish, was it constituted of the lineal descendants of a common father. On the contrary, or mother, excuse me. On the contrary, it distinctly involved the idea of descent from a common mother. Nor has it any resemblance to the Scottish clan or the Canton or the Switzer. In the formation of an Iroquois tribe, a portion was taken from many households and bound together by a tribal bond. The wife, her children, and her descendants in the female line would, in perpetuity, be linked to the destinies of her own tribe, while the husband, his brother, and sisters, and the descendants of the latter in the female line would, in like manner, be united to another tribe and led by its affiliates, or affinities, excuse me. Herein was a bond of union between the several tribes of the same nation, corresponding in some degree with the cross relationship founded upon consanguinity, which bound together the tribes of the same emblem in the different nations. The Iroquois claim to have originated the idea of a division of the people into tribes as a means of creating new relationships by which to bind the people more firmly together. It is further asserted by them that they forced or introduced this social organization among the Cherokees, the Chippeways, the Mississaugas, and several other Indian nations with whom in ancient times they were in constant intercourse. The fact that this division of the people of the same nation into tribes does not prevail generally among our Indian races favors the assertion of the Iroquois. On the other hand, the laws of descent, at least of the crown, among the Aztecs, dimly shadows forth the existence of a similar social organization, which may have been reproduced among the Iroquois or preserved through a remote affinity of blood. At all events, it was the life and strength of the Iroquois League. Of the comparative value of these institutions when contrasted with those of civilized country and of their capability of elevating the race, it is not necessary here to inquire. It was the boast of the Iroquois that the great object of their confederacy was peace, to break up the spirit of perpetual warfare which had wasted the red race from age to age. Such an insight into the true end of all legitimate government by those who constructed this tribal league excites as great surprise as admiration. It is the highest and noblest aspect in which human institutions can be viewed, and the thought itself, universal peace among Indian races, possible of attainment, was a ray of intellect from no ordinary mind. To consummate such a purpose, the Iroquois nation were to be concentrated into one political fraternity, in a manner effectively to prevent offshoots and secessions. By its natural growth, this fraternity would accumulate sufficient power, and then they go on by affiliation to merge everything into one common family. A remarkable book written in 1851, League of the Iroquois, Lewis Henry Morgan.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you, broadcasting on commercial radio stations from coast to coast, on Sirius XM all across the North American continent, on Pacifica stations across America, Europe, and Africa, on American Forces Radio and every U.S. military base in the world, on your electronic devices via TuneIn, Progressive Voices, and the Thom Hartmann app, and simulcast on television via Free Speech TV on both Dish Network, DirecTV, and cable systems nationwide, including Manhattan Neighborhood Network, which gets us into literally every home in Manhattan. Welcome to our program. So glad to have you with us. The ugly face of Republican authoritarianism, the twisted, distorted, angry, hateful face of a Republican Party who desperately serves the morbidly rich and gives lip service to average working Americans at the same time that they're doing everything they can to destroy the lives of average working Americans by cutting Social Security, huge cuts in Social Security Administration in this Trump budget, cutting Medicare, an over $500 billion cut to Medicare in this Trump budget, cutting Medicaid, cutting food stamps, cutting WIC, Women's Infants and Children's Programs, cutting money to education, transferring more and more money out of public schools into private, particularly religious private schools and right-wing private schools, for-profit private schools. All the things that this administration is doing to, cutting back on safety for everything from minors to average, just to average working people. Reducing regulations that stop fracking and refining operations from poisoning people downwind, allowing the coal companies to dump more and more coal waste into our rivers, thus poisoning downriver communities that draw the river, the water from drinking water from the rivers. Ryan Zinke turning, destroying our national monuments and turning them over to foreign mining companies to rape the United States for foreign profits that'll be recycled back into Republican coffers. This is what's going on. This is the level of obscene greed and criminality that has come to represent the racketeering, influenced, corrupt organization, the Republican Party, the modern-day GOP, the party where in 2000, when George W. Bush decided he was going to run for president, they literally flipped the stars on the elephant upside down. The upside-down five-pointed star is the satanic star. It's the goat, right? The two horns at the top, the two ears on the side, and the chinny chin on the bottom. When you flip it right side up, you've got the star on the U.S. flag. That's what's on the Democratic logo on the donkey. On the Republican logo since 2000, we've had 3 satanic stars. Surprised? I'm not. And you know, you want to really see how it plays out. Well, there's a Ohio State senator. His name is Dan Foreman. And a group of high school students contacted him in Idaho. They're Idaho high school students, and they wanted to lobby their senator, right? Nothing wrong with that. In fact, we're encouraged to do that, right? Lobbying is something every senator likes. And what they specifically wanted to lobby him for was 2 things. Number one, they wanted there was one piece of legislation in the state capitol that allowed women to receive up to a 12-month supply of prescribed birth control pills. Apparently, right now in Idaho, if you get a prescription, you can only fill it for 1 month at a time. And they're just asking for convenience. Hey, you know, we want to be able to get our birth controls for the whole pills for the year rather than 1 month at a time. Number one. And number two, the state has like a 30, 40-year-old sex education law, and they wanted it updated to include training on sexual assault. What is rape? What does it mean when someone says no? This was the students' request. These were the students' requests. And these were both pieces of legislation that were before the Idaho State Senate. Properly and appropriately expand sex education to include consent, and allow pharmacies to sell us 12 months worth of birth control instead of just 1 month at a time, so we have to go back 12 times a year and embarrass ourselves or whatever. You know, some people are just embarrassed picking up any kind of prescription for that matter. So what did Republican Senator Dan Foreman do when these students showed up? I mean, this is, I'm going to tell you in just a minute how the kids in Parkland are being treated right now by the hard right, by Fox so-called news, by right-wing hate radio, by the right-wing echo chamber ecosystem funded by the right-wing billionaires. We'll get into that. But this is how the Idaho senator responded when the students showed up at his office. And by the way, before you play this, the students who showed up at his office had driven 7 hours to meet this guy. He agreed to meet them at 7 o'clock in the morning, and they were hundreds of miles away. So they got up at like 3 o'clock in the morning to drive to this guy's office to meet with him to say, you know, please vote for these 2 very simple pieces, relatively innocuous pieces of legislation. But, gee, it was girls wanting to have something to do with, you know, arguably control over their own bodies. Here's what he said.
Me of not honoring my commitment to be in a meeting. Abortion is murder. I stand against it. I am a Roman Catholic. I'm a conservative Republican. I think what you guys do stinks.
That is your choice.
You're damn right it's my choice, so stay out of my office.
You shouldn't make it other people's.
Next time you walk in my office, you're going to be dealing with ISP.
I don't think.
He threatened him. He threatened him. Next time you walk in my office, you're going to be dealing with the state police. Right. This guy, Idaho State Senator Dan Foreman. What an ass. I mean, I don't know how to describe it other than that. Paul Dillon, the public affairs director of Planned Parenthood of Greater Washington and Northern Idaho, said this diatribe was unhinged. He said, even if you disagree with what we have to say, there's no excuse for that kind of behavior. He's being a bully. So, you know, here's what the students tweeted. We drove 7 hours to make it to our scheduled 9 a.m. meeting. The lawmaker is not doing his job by blowing us off. This is amazing. But, you know, then it goes on, and later on, Foreman tweeted, "Stop harassing me and my staff. You're killing babies." Yeah, if you want to talk about killing babies, talk to a Democratic senator, Marianne Jordan of Boise. Right. His Twitter account apparently was deleted. Senator Dan the Man. Briefly reactivated. It might be a what do you call it? A spoof account. Anyhow, I retweeted it so you can see what I'm talking about, including the letter that the students left him which was just very kind and didn't say anything about abortion. But these guys, they're hysterical. You know, you come in and say, you know, I want to talk about, you know, sex ed and women's rights. Oh, it's abortion. I'm hysterical. Hey, I'd like to talk about, you know, people dying in our schools. Oh, my God, it's gun control. You know, because these Republicans, they're getting so much money from the right-wing Catholics and the forced birth folks, and they're getting so much money from the National Rifle Association, and they really don't want to be held to account for it. They don't want to answer to their people. And the same thing is happening right now with the kids who survived the Parkland massacre. This is from a piece over at Think Progress. The far-right smear campaign against students who survived the Parkland massacre. They're being targeted because they don't want more of their classmates to die. And they talk about how this guy, Gateway Pundit, far-right blog that has press credentials into the White House, is basically trashing David Hogg, one of the young people who are speaking out, because his father is a retired FBI agent. Therefore, the FBI, which is out to get Donald Trump, must be helping this kid get in front of the cameras. Therefore, maybe the FBI shot at the school. Who knows? But Mr. Wintridge of Gateway Pundit is just like all over this. And then Jim Hoft, the editor of Gateway Pundit, appears on One America News, another right-wing network funded by billionaires. This is crazy.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
All the hate that is being spent on these kids by these... When did killing children become a partisan issue? When did the Republican Party become the party of killing kids? And welcome back. Let's see here. Anna in Eustis, Florida. Hey, Anna, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Oh, I want to compliment you on your view about treating guns the same way we license cars. I think that was brilliant. I hope somebody listens to you.
Thank you.
What I want to add is... this business about blaming everything on mental health and autism. I want to explain something that I have not heard spoken about. It's part of autism that is called Asperger's syndrome. And I have had the, the fortune, let's say, to raise an Asperger's autistic child. And I wish I had known 60 years ago when I was trying to find out how to do that. Mm-hmm. At that time, autism hadn't even been discovered yet, although it was just as rampant then as it is now. Yeah. But this business of the Asperger's syndrome, they need to really look at that in connection with their mental health investigations as to people who could become mass shooters or something similar.
On the one hand. On the other hand, and I think that you could say that that's probably true of a variety of mental illnesses, in particular sociopathy, sociopathic personality disorder, and narcissistic personality disorder, which very often go together as they have in our president. Yeah. But there are a lot of people who are on the autistic spectrum, and there are a lot of people who have arguably marginal Asperger's, and some have, full-blown. All of us, I have some OCD characteristics. I mean, and it's easy to point to those and say, oh, we can be diagnosed as mentally ill. I think that we need to normalize the spectrum, or much of the spectrum, and I don't think that we're doing that. I think that we're spending, an awful lot of attention on trying to pathologize it. Back in the 90s, I said ADD was not a pathology. It was just a different way of understanding the world. I think the same is true.
Has it.
Yeah, I think the same is true of autism. And also,
true,
I think that
Anna, found out.
Yeah, and also, Anna, we have to remember that this whole concern about mental health that the NRA and the Republican Party has just recently discovered. After what it's been 40 years since Reagan closed the mental hospitals. This whole thing is really just a way of diverting our attention away from the fact that guns kill people. I mean,
absolutely. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, the new saying is...
The thing about the Asperger's, if you can identify that in a child and follow him, you're going to be looking at somebody who is very capable of becoming a mass murderer.
Or capable of becoming Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein had a bad case of Asperger's.
I've known quite a few people now that have it or have had it, but I had it when I was younger, but I was able to take myself apart and put me back together again without it.
Yeah, well, that's pretty impressive because it's supposed to be a neurological baseline condition. But Anna, thank you for the call.
Neurological, and I think that's where they need to start looking as far as the mental health is concerned.
Yeah, I think the main thing we need to start looking at is why do we have so many damn guns? But I understand what you're saying. Anna, thank you for the call. Very well said. We'll be right back. So, as I was saying, the war against young people is continuing. The old hard right, the ossified and billionaire hard right, has now put not just progressive talk radio, but young people in their crosshairs. And the way that they're going after these people, I mean, I mentioned David Hogg before the break. His father's a retired FBI agent. And this guy with Gateway Pundit, Windrich, also uses an edited YouTube video of Hogg having some difficulty answering questions for a taped interview as evidence that Hogg is, quote, heavily coached on lines and is merely reciting a script. Of course, there's no evidence to support that claim. And then he writes, why would the child of an FBI agent be used as a pawn for an anti-Trump rhetoric and anti-gun legislation? Wait a minute, right-wing so-called news site. Are you saying that when a teenager, when a young person speaks out about politics, that they're being manipulated? Really? My recollection is that my generation back in the 60s and 70s and early 70s literally ended the Vietnam War, which killed about as many people, over 56,000 Americans, killed about as many people as in the United States are killed in just 2 years by guns. Maybe these kids can be the generation that ends this war on America, the NRA's war on America, the gun manufacturers' war on America, the Republicans' war on America. The article is also being promoted by, this is from Think Progress, by Bradley Blakeman, a member of the George W. Bush administration, a lobbyist and frequent television pundit. He says, this kid is a shill. He's bragged about the number of interviews he's doing. It plays to the camera. Yeah, like you don't? It's amazing. And then they're going after Emma Gonzalez and Delaney Tarr and Cameron Kasky. The entire article attacks these students for smiling in the photo. The article's entitled, School Massacre Survivors and CBS Reporter Party Like Rock Stars, but there's no evidence of any partying. That's incredible. It's just incredible. How despicable. Meanwhile, you know, as I said, you know, when you know, young people or anybody goes to speak to their Republican members of the House or Senate, they generally don't get through. These guys aren't holding town hall meetings anymore at all. This, Tom Thunkett just tweeted this. Breaking, Senator Tom Cotton, a man who claims to represent his constituents, literally has sent a cease and desist order to his own constituents, ordering them not to call or writing him. By the way, Tom Cotton is the guy who was in the meeting where Donald Trump made the S-hole remark about African countries, and Tom Cotton went on camera and lied about it. Here's the letter on the headline. Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas, United States Senate. The phone number 202-225-3121. And it says, this letter is immediate notification that all communication must cease and desist immediately with all offices of U.S. Senator Tom Cotton. All other contact will be deemed harassment and will be reported to the United States Capitol Police. Right. So this is the Republican war on America, frankly, on the United States. And right now they're hysterical about the guns because Richard Burr took $6.9 million from the NRA. Roy Blunt took $4.5 million from the NRA. Tom Tillis took $4.4 million from the NRA. Cory Gardner, $3.8 million. Marco Rubio, $3.3 million. Joni Ernst, $3.1 million. Rob Portman, $3 million. Todd Young, $2.8 million. Bill Cassidy, $2.8 million. This is just from the last election cycle because all these senators were up for re-election. So you can bet your sweet patootie that right now the NRA is pouring that kind of money into the campaigns of the senators and members of the House who are up for re-election right now. For example, and these are their names and their tweets. Roy Blunt, Senator Roy Blunt, gets money from the NRA, tweets saddened by the tragic loss of life. Virginia Congressman Barbara Comstock gets money from the NRA. I'm heartbroken by the mass murder. North Carolina Senator Richard Burr gets money from the NRA. My heart is with the people. Colorado Congressman Mike Coffman gets money from the NRA, tweets, my thoughts and prayers go out to all the victims. Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley gets money from the NRA, praying for the victims and their families. Texas Congressman Will Hurd, this is all, by the way, around the Vegas shooting. Texas Congressman Will Hurd receives money from the NRA. I'm deeply saddened by the tragic shooting in New York Congressman John Cato gets $9 grand. He didn't tweet, apparently. Rand Paul gets money from the NRA. Tragic news this morning. Kelly and I send our prayers. Maine Congressman Bruce Poliquin gets money from the NRA. My thoughts are with all of those affected. Ohio Senator Rob Portman gets money from the NRA. Jane and I mourn the loss of innocent lives. Florida Senator Marco Rubio gets money from the NRA. I'm praying for all the victims, their families, and our first responders. New York Congressman Lee Zeldin gets money from the NRA. All Americans extend our deepest sympathies. North Dakota Senator John Hoeven gets money from the NRA. Mickey and I are praying for victims of last night's terrible shooting. Iowa Congressman Rod Bloom gets money from the NRA. Unspeakable tragic night. Virginia Congressman Bob Goodlatte gets money from the NRA. Praying for the victims. Right, Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson gets money from the NRA. Heartbreaking attack. Our thoughts are with everyone affected by this heinous act, he tweets. And on it goes.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
That was pages 1 and 2 of a 30-page list of members of Congress who take money from the NRA and then tweet thoughts and prayers. How sick does it get? It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Seize the Time, the story of the Black Panther Party and Huey P. Newton by Bobby Seale. This is from page 85, a subchapter titled Huey Backs the Pigs Down. And there are a few words in here that I'll be filling in, as it were. They're walking, he says, one day as we were walking out of the office, I guess we'd been there about a month or so, a pig passed by. He saw us coming out of the office with shotguns and pistols on our sides. About 6 or 7 of us came out of the office there in the daytime, and we looked at the pig as he passed by, and he jumped on his radio because he saw us coming out of the office with these pieces and stuff. We had just finished field stripping weapons, learning about 00 buckshot, learning about the 9mm and the .45, and having a political education session. We had a .45 and a .357 Magnum in the group and a couple of M1s. We had 3 or 4 shotguns by then. We bought up guns like a son of a bitch then. The pig went down 2 blocks and turned around, came back up the other side of the street. They were building rapid transit, BART, right down from Grove Street there, and we went up the other side of the boulevard and came back. We readily assessed that the pigs were ready to see what the F was happening, that this pig had radioed in, and he was running it down, how he had, quote, seen some N-words come out of a place here with some guns and blop, blop, de bloop, etc., come out of this office with guns and stuff. He was radioing into other pigs to help get him. Huey had his father's car that day, and he goes through that whole thing. So anyhow, the police pull him over, and Huey got in the car, and the pig came up to the window. You have any driver's license? So Huey rolled the window down. That wasn't more than a 3 or 4 inch crack in the window. Huey handed his license out the window. Is this your true name, the pig said? And Huey said, yes, that's my true name, Huey P. Newton. Is this your true address, 841 47th Street? And Huey said, yep, that's my true address, 841 47th Street. And what are you doing with the guns? And Huey said, what are you doing with your gun? This particular pig decided he wasn't going to argue, so he went back and got his little writing pad there where they fill out S-word. Your true name is Huey P. Newton? Huey said, that's right. The pig wrote it down. Your true address is 841 47th Street? Huey said, that's right. The pig then looked at his license. What's your phone number? And Huey said, 5, and stopped and wouldn't say anything else. And the pig said, 5 what? And this is when all the S-word between the pig and the party and the pigs began. Huey said, the 5th Amendment. You ever heard of it? Don't you know about the constitutional right of a person not to testify against himself? 5, I don't have to give you anything but my identification, name, and address, so therefore I don't even want to talk to you. You can leave my car and leave me alone. I don't even want to hear you. What do you mean, the pig said. And Huey said, just what I said. The constitutional right of any man is that he doesn't have to testify against himself. And Huey had a big M1 sitting to his right with his hand on it. I had this 9mm sitting beside me, and Huey had this M1 at his side. Huey was driving. 4 other brothers were in the back seat. One of them was Bobby Hutton. They were being quiet because Huey told them to be quiet. And the pig is going crazy. He's by himself, and Huey's got all these black N-words in the car going for the MFer. Meanwhile, while the pig is trying to get bad, 3 cars drove up behind us and 1 in the front. Some more were in the driveway. Blop, blop, blop de blue. Then another car came in front of us. A pig jumped out of the car, walked up to our car, and said through the crack in the window with a hoggish voice trying to sound intimidating, what's going on here? And Huey said, the same basic procedures that are supposed to go on. Huey rolled the window down another 5 or 6 inches. The pigs were looking at the guns in the car. Can I see that pistol there? One of the pigs said. No, you can't see it, Huey told him. I was beginning to get skeptical about what was happening because he pointed to my 9mm pistol. Huey was on probation, and if they thought that this was Huey's pistol, I didn't know this law stuff the way Huey knew it, so I moved the pistol over beside me real close. It had been lying in the middle of the seat. I said, no, you can't see it. Huey said, no, you can't see the pistol, nor this, pointing to his rifle. And you don't want to look, and I don't want you to look at it. You don't have to look at it. Is that your pistol? He asked Huey. And I said, no, it's not his pistol, it's my pistol. I said that because I was thinking the man's going to jump on Huey because he already told me about the probation law. If he gets caught with a pistol, he's burned. But if he gets caught with a rifle, the man can't mess with him because his probation officer told him he can carry a rifle or shotgun, and he couldn't stop him. The pig said, can I see it or not? So Huey said to me, I'll talk. And then he said to the pig, no, you can't see the pistol. Get away from the car. We don't want you around the car, and that's all there is to it. Well, I can ask him if I can see his pistol or not, the pig says. So I says, well, you can't see my pistol. The MFers tried to get indignant. They were blabbing and oinking to each other about who in the hell we thought we were, and Constitution my ass, they're just turning it around. Then the pig said to Huey, who the hell do you think you are? Look, damn it, Huey said. He opened the car door. This is where Huey got mad. I mean, you have to imagine this N-word. He got mad because these dogs were going to carry on, and they were bracing up like they were bad. Huey didn't go for this at all. Huey got very mad. He opened up the door saying, who the hell do you think you are? In the first place, this man, pointing at the pig, came up here and asked me for my license like he was citing me for a ticket or observation of some kind. This police officer is supposed to be carrying out his duty, and here you come talking about our guns? Huey put his hand around his M1 rifle and continued, we have a constitutional right to carry the guns, and anyway, I don't want to hear it. The pigs backed up a couple of steps, and Huey was coming out of the car. Huey had his hand back in the car getting his M1, and you know, if you've ever seen Huey, he gets growly but articulate. He came out of the car with his M1. Huey knows this law so well that he wouldn't have had the one M1 loaded inside the car. So he came out of the car, he dropped around into the chamber right away. Clack, clop. Who do you think you all are anyway? Huey said to the pigs. And the pigs were all on the sidewalk harassing all the brothers and sisters who gathered around. "You move on down the street," said the pig. Huey started interrupting. "You don't have to move down the street. Don't go anywhere. These pigs can't keep you from observing. You have a right to observe an officer carrying out his duty." And these pigs, they listened to all this S-word, and it goes on from there. It's a great story. Seize the Time by Bobby Seale. Welcome back. Taking back the mainstream media 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. It's Thom Hartmann here with you. Viagra for your brain. Don in Seattle. Hey, Don, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, I haven't called for a while. How you doing?
I'm well. How are you, Don?
Oh, I got a few health issues. Anyway, I was going to talk about renewing Glass-Steagall, but I don't know, this gun topic is such a hot issue. And locally, the news yesterday interviewed a local gun shop owner who decided not to, for a while anyway, to sell automatic rifles or bump stocks, but just handguns and hunting rifles. And he said he probably would lose money, but he urged other local gun shop owners to do the same.
Well, and the gun shop down in Florida that sold the shooter, Mr. Cruz, the AR-15, and apparently some other weapons as well, has closed indefinitely. So those people are going through a serious crisis of conscience. You said, Don, that you were going to call about banking and then shifted to guns. Let me give you something that ties the two of them together. Okay. A couple of weeks ago, maybe a month or so ago, MasterCard and Visa, and I believe American Express, all announced that they will no longer finance, they will no longer allow their cards to be used to purchase Bitcoin or Ethereum or any of the other Bitcoin parallels. So the credit card companies, for a long time, have established that there are some things that they will not allow you to use your credit card to buy. This is the most recent. And it wouldn't be that much of a stretch for MasterCard and Visa to simply say, we're just no longer going to let our cards be used to buy guns. If people want to buy guns, they're going to have to pay cash or write a check. And that would be a real consequential statement if the banks wanted to have, any at least perception of courage or morality at all. What do you think?
I totally agree, and especially, just think of what happened if some shooter goes into the New York Stock Exchange and starts shooting up all the money brokers and whatnot.
Yeah. Although just like Congress, the New York Stock Exchange very aggressively keeps guns out. Just like the NRA meeting that let's see, which administration official is going to be speaking at the NRA meeting? Was it Trump? I'm pretty sure. Yeah, there's a big NRA meeting coming up, and one of the Trump or Pence, one of them is going to be speaking there. And the news story that was out, that was the really interesting part, is that the NRA is not allowing any guns into the convention center. Seriously, I'm not making this up. You go to the NRA convention, it's happening in the next week or two, and you will not be allowed to bring your gun. And
at the NRA convention, that's absurd.
Yeah, these people are just total fools. Don, thank you for the call. It's good to hear from you. Morris in Long Beach, California. Morris, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Professor, listen, there's a book. It's written by your sister. It's called The American Syndrome, Apocalypse, War, and Our Call to Greatness. Her name is Betsy Hartman, The American Syndrome. Listen, you got to read this. If I were a black history teacher, which I'm not, the first book my students would read would be this book. If I was teaching U.S. history, the first book my students would read would be this book. It goes all the way back to John Winthrop. If you want to understand our misogynistic, patriarchal, and non-inclusive spirit, you've got to read this book. I'm telling you the truth. Every subject that you can think about is in this book. Let me read this real quickly because I practiced this.
Hang on just a second. Let me interrupt you. It's called The American Syndrome. Okay, yeah, I'm on Amazon. I'm seeing it right now. Oh, yeah, I'll buy it.
War, and it's written by your sister. I won't get into your background, but she's got to be your sister. If not biologically, at least by what do they call it? What do they call that in biology when it's not? They don't have to touch, but you can still transfer stuff. But anyway,
mitosis, not meiosis. No, I think you're talking virgin births. But in any case, yeah,
there you go. You got it. But John Ehrlichman, this is Nixon's domestic policy advisor. Now listen to this. You want to know what this was really all about? He's quoting John Ehrlichman, by the way. You want to know what this was really all about? The Nixon campaign in 1968? The Nixon White House and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies: the anti-war left and black people. You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or blacks, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin and then criminalizing them both heavily, we could disrupt those communities, we could arrest their leaders and raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. Reagan turned Nixon's covert campaign into an all-out crusade. Ladies and gentlemen, please, I beg you, get this book, The American Syndrome, Apocalypse War and Our Call to Greatness, and that will give you what Ray Charles called understanding.
Okay. Morris, I just ordered a copy. Thanks a lot for the heads up, and that is a great quote. That Ehrlichman quote has been all over the place lately, and it's a good one. Morris, thank you so much. Michael in Imperial Beach, California. Hey, Michael, what's up?
Hey, Mr. Hartman. I'm sure the scientists and researchers who create and develop the SSRI category of psychotropic drugs are good people who are trying to help people. As for the people in the boardroom, I'm sure all they care about is market share and the price of their stock.
Yep.
Now, if it's not the gun, it's the mental disorder, as the Republicans are arguing, causing mass shootings. When a person seeks help for mental health, usually they are prescribed an SSRI, which I'm sure helps some people. But with all the side effects like suicidal tendencies, agitation, etc., do you think we should prescribe SSRIs to underdeveloped minds like the Florida shooter? And do you think the pharmaceutical industry has any blame in this game? Thank you, Tom.
Sure. I think that SSRIs are wildly overprescribed. We have 1 in 10 Americans, I believe it's 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 women, adult women right now, on some sort of psychoactive drug, which I think reflects the not just patriarchy, but the patronizing view of many women by many male doctors. And we know that arguably the principal side effect of using these drugs, or one of the largest side effects of using these drugs, is suicidal ideation, thinking about suicide. And it's because, people lose their ability to empathize with other people when they're on these drugs. So they lose their ability to imagine what their family how badly devastated their family will be if they commit suicide, for example. And similarly, if they go in and shoot up a school, and the vast majority, so far of what we know of school shooters have been on drugs like this, if not the absolute majority, they don't view, when you're on these drugs, you view other people as things rather than as people. It diminishes empathy. Now, the benefit of that is that it diminishes basically all emotion. So if you're going through serious grief or agony or whatever, maybe over a short period of time they would be useful. But for long-term use, I think that these are very, very, very dangerous drugs. Joshua in Wichita Falls, Texas. Hey, Joshua, what's on your mind?
Hey, Mr. Hartman, how are you doing today?
I'm well. How are you?
Not too bad. I'm hoping you can clarify something about the Second Amendment in Article 1, Section 8.
Sure.
So I'm sure you're well aware of well-regulated militia and the rights of the people should not be infringed phrase of the Second Amendment.
Yeah.
Article 1, Section 8 lays out the powers of Congress, and in there, I'm going to paraphrase this, to provide for the calling forth the militia, to provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia, reserving the states, respectively, the authority of training the militia according to the discipline prescribed by Congress. That discipline is U.S. Code 10. It's what we use to train the National Guard in the same way we train active duty and reserve units. Now, I don't want to take away guns from ordinary people and for sensible regulation, like a lot of the things you propose, but it looks like it's been misinterpreted incorrectly, possibly. Could you clarify?
Yeah. Yes. What happened was, and you can read all this, if you just Google Second Amendment was ratified to preserve slavery, you'll find an article that I wrote about this. What happened was that Patrick Henry was the largest slaveholder in Virginia. The original purpose of the Second Amendment was because Jefferson and Madison both wanted the federal government not to have a standing army during times of peace. Instead, they wanted to have, like Switzerland does, and basically everybody's part of the militia, or at least all men between 17 and 47. They're all part of the militia, and they all have access to a weapon. Typically, they were actually kept in armories, but in any case. And so the original Second Amendment said for the security of a free nation. Patrick Henry got up in the Virginia ratifying convention, and James Madison was physically there. He was a member of that convention. And you know, Madison, of course, the author of the Second Amendment. And he said, and I quote Patrick Henry, "Let me call here your attention to Article 1, Section 8 of the proposed Constitution, which gives the power to Congress to provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining militia. You, sir, see that their control over the last and best defense is unlimited. If they neglect or refuse to discipline or arm our militia, they will be ridiculous." He goes on, he said, "If this country may be invaded, a state may go to war, but cannot suppress slave insurrections under this new Constitution. If there should happen an insurrection of slaves, the country cannot be said to be invaded. They cannot therefore suppress it without the interposition of Congress. In this state of Virginia, there are 236,000 blacks, and there are many in several other states, but there are few or none in the northern states. May Congress not say that every black man must fight in a war? Did we not see a little of this in the last war? We were not so hard pushed as to make emancipation general, but acts of the Assembly passed that every slave who would go in the army should be free." You know, and so Madison said, "You're paranoid." I mean, he literally used that word, paranoid. And Patrick Henry said, no, they could use Article 1, Section 8 to free our slaves and put them in the military. And I'm not going to tolerate this. So Madison changed the language from a free nation to a free state, in part because Patrick Henry wanted to preserve the slave patrols in Virginia. The people from Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina all had the same concern. And so that's why it ended up, the Second Amendment ended up the way it was. So, and as I said, you read the whole thing, and there's a whole lot more of what Patrick Henry, the largest slaveholder in Virginia, had to say. The Second Amendment was ratified to preserve slavery by Thom Hartmann. Just Google it, you'll find it. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Stick around. We'll be back with more of your calls and the news of the day right after this. Welcome back. Let's see here. Debbie in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Hey, Debbie, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's up?
I just have a question, and thanks for talking with me. You know, whenever a crime is committed and somebody's in a getaway car, that person doesn't actually commit the crime. They're just sitting there waiting.
They are equally guilty of the crime in a court of law.
Exactly, right. So these Republicans, they're refusing to put a law on guns. I mean, could not all these people get together that have been families that have been traumatized and schools and sue the GOP people? Aren't they like the ones sitting behind the wheel, just sitting there, not doing nothing? But
or sue the gun manufacturers. The problem with this, Debbie, if this was any other product, you know, I mean, there are lawsuits exactly like you're describing right now going on over OxyContin, for example. And, you know, where the corporation's being sued, where the drug salespeople are being sued, where the manufacturer's being sued. And there have even been attempts to sue legislators who have, you know, basically been toadies for the OxyContin people. I think it's Purdue Pharmaceutical is the company. But the difference between OxyContin and guns is that the NRA donated millions of dollars to a bunch of Republican members of the House and Senate, who then passed a law saying that it is illegal for you to sue gun manufacturers. It is illegal for you to mount a class action lawsuit against gun manufacturers. And it's illegal for you to sue or take legal action against anybody who is supportive of gun manufacturers. So your scenario would work for any other product in America. If it was a defective car, defective baby seat, you know, a financial product that blows up in your face, you know, a pension that doesn't pay off, a health insurance company that lies, whatever it may be. But your argument will not work against guns as long as the Republicans control the House and Senate.
I see. All righty. Well, that's
Sorry to
That's my
burst your
question.
bubble. It was a great idea, but they saw you coming. That's what's going on. Debbie, thank you for the call. Marty in Evergreen Park, Illinois. Hey, Marty, what's up?
Hey, Tom, thanks so much for taking my call here. Yeah, just first off, wanted to say thoughts and prayers to my butt.
Yeah.
Is it finally time we talk about NRA campaign money, or is it too soon? I mean, Sandy Hook was 5 years ago. Is it still too soon? You know?
Yeah.
And we were talking about the well-regulated militia. I mean, is Nicholas Cruz or Adam Lanza part of this well-regulated militia? Is that the way we should never infringe on kids getting shot at school? Because
Apparently, and Dylan Roof and yeah, the whole bunch of them, yeah.
Yeah, and can I share a quote, too, from Florida State Senator Dennis Baxley, who was on the radio the other day, and I couldn't believe what this guy was actually saying.
Okay, we got about 15 seconds here. Go for it.
Yeah, he said, what we're dealing with is the fact that with a gun-free zone, we've inadvertently made these students a sterile target. And they enter the campus knowing that no one is prepared to stop them. We need to focus on breaking the sterile target so that we're not giving the message that no one.
This guy's completely
will be able
full
to
of.
resist
You know what? There were 2 armed guards in that school.
You can't make this stuff up, Tom.
I know. That's incredible. You had 2 armed guards in that school, and there was an armed guard in Columbine. What did he do? He ran the other direction. I mean, Marty, thank you for the call. That's horrible. Thank you. For all the progressive news of the day, check out the Hartmann Report, hartmannreport.com. Welcome back. Bob in Bloomington, Indiana. Bob, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's up?
I want to ask a question, and you can answer me later, but would you recommend a good book and author on U.S. history? And then I have a suggestion about people who watch Trump TV, what to call them, Trump TV, also known as Fox News. We can call them swamp foxes. Disney had a serial back in the late 50s, early 60s about a Confederate group of guerrilla fighters that went and raided Union outposts, and the leader was called a swamp fox. So swamp foxes might be kind of fit.
Oh, there might be a little too much glory for them. By the way, a book on American history, Howard Zinn's History of the United States, People's History of the United States, it's called.
Okay. And one thing I'd like to say real quick, I won't keep it. Why aren't these mass shooters tagged with premeditated murder? I mean, I don't know about the mental health, but a lot of these things, they've made plans.
Well, Cruz has been charged with that. He's been charged with 17 counts of first-degree murder.
First-degree, okay.
And they're going for the death penalty.
Okay. But now when a person's using a gun that's designed to kill people, to me, when they walk in, they waive their right to a fair trial. Now, if I was the police chief and I was, notified, I tell my officer, shoot to kill.
Well,
is that terrible?
No, I get what you're saying and where you're coming from, and I think that if you walk into an active shooter situation and you're law enforcement and the person has already killed somebody or is even threatening to kill somebody, that shooting to kill is not an unreasonable response. Yeah.
Yeah. They're not using a weapon to rob a liquor store or gas station for robbery. Their intention is to kill people.
Right, and this is one of the reasons why we have the aggravated in assault, very often aggregated with aggregated. No, that's the wrong word. In any case, with a weapon, I mean, we have actually laws against using guns in the commission of crimes. And so, it's an aggravated crime by virtue of having the gun, and that increases the penalty. So, excellent. I'm not sure about the swamp fox thing. It just sounds a little too Days of Glory stuff. But I get where you're coming from. Bob, thanks for the call. Martin in Portland, Oregon. Hey, Martin, what's up?
Hey, Tom. First-time listener. I really like your show. Listening through X-Ray. Anyway. I totally agree with you on all your points that you've been making for the last week or so on this shooting down in Florida, and I'm so proud of those kids. They are just so much. They're just showing so much.
They are
more,
the best of America
maturity.
Right now.
Yeah, they're showing much more maturity than this idiot that we have in office. But one of the things I wanted to ask you also, if it's possible, to open up discussion on, is that yes, NRA. We want to, you know, any of those politicians that connect to them, we want to have that badge of shame. But I was wondering also, because I haven't heard this yet, you know, about Hollywood's culpability in all of this. You know, with their promoting gun violence and violence against women, against you know, everybody, you know, and it's like, you know, I know that it's, you know, I have a friend that says, well, it's just, you know, that's just movies, that's just that. But I just wonder if it's a component, you know, like all these things in our society. We have a very violent society, you know, and it's so violent, not just that we have access to guns, but we have access to video games and you know, violent, you know, image.
I get all that,
imagery.
Martin, but the use of the viewing of American-made action movies is on a per capita basis is actually higher in several other countries than in the United States. This is American-made, like Arnold Schwarzenegger movies. I believe it's Japan and the UK. I may be wrong. It's been years since I read that study, but there are several other countries where on a per capita basis, more people watch American violent movies than here, and yet they have 5 or 10% of the rate of violence that we have in the United States. We have, our problem is too many guns. It's just that simple. When you look at the states that have the highest levels of gun ownership, they have the highest levels of gun crimes, gun accidental deaths, and gun-based suicides. You look at the states with the lowest levels of gun ownership, they have the lowest levels of gun crime, suicide, and accidental deaths by guns. It's real simple. It's the guns, stupid.
Yeah, and those countries that you mentioned, they don't have a gun problem, so their citizens aren't going out and acting out. So,
and they're not even acting it out with knives or fists. You know, I think that people are actually able. It might even be cathartic. You know, there's an argument to be made. We watch football. We watch these football players beat each other up and be injured, but it's a catharsis. It's our proxy for war. I mean, there's something about war that is wired into us. It's wired into some kinds of ants. It's apparently wired into human beings, and so, you know, finding appropriate outlets that give us the adrenaline charge that don't cause us to take that next step into actual violence may actually even be a good thing. You know, and this is something that's being debated. But the fact of the matter is that American violent movies, you know, don't seem to have any association between viewership and violence in any other country. And so the association in the United States is probably coincidental rather than causal.
I see that. Yes. Okay. Thank you so much for bringing that to all of our attention.
You're welcome, Martin, and thanks for the call. But I guarantee you that you're still going to see gun apologists on TV continuing to roll out this old canard and say, "Oh, well, it's, you know, it's a violent culture." Yeah, right. Sue in Mountain Home, Arkansas. Hey, Sue, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. I'm just a little blue dot in a big red sea out here in Arkansas, but I want to bring something to your attention.
Okay.
Okay. They just passed a bill in Arkansas that college students can bring guns on campus with a special permit.
Oh, how sweet.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
I couldn't believe, I mean, I didn't make this up. It's real. It was on our local news. And I'm in Tom Cotton's district, and you can't get hold of him either.
Yeah.
Because he's not there. He's in Washington.
Yeah, well, Tom Cotton has no interest in the people of Arkansas.
No, not at all.
Once every 6 years when he wants them to vote for him.
Exactly. And I have one more small thing, and then I'll let you...
Very quick. We just have a few seconds.
Sure. If you want to clear a room out here, go to your doctor's office, car dealership, turn on your program, and see how many people who are waiting for their service, see how many people leave the room. Huh. It's so funny. We did this. Me and my husband did this at a car dealership. It was great.
That's incredible. Okay, Sue, thank you. Thank you. That's funny. I can clear a room. I think that's good news. Appreciate the call, Sue. Thank you.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Medea Benjamin's new book, Kingdom of the Unjust, Behind the U.S.-Saudi Connection. And this is from the introduction. Through the women-led peace organization Code Pink, which I co-founded with Jody Evans after the 9/11 attacks, I have spent much of the last decade standing up against U.S. military intervention in the Middle East and supporting local democracy activists. I traveled many times to the region, listening to human rights activists, marching with them in the streets, dodging tear gas and bullets, and getting beaten up and deported by government thugs. I have seen firsthand the deadly effects of U.S. foreign policies. The 2003 U.S. invasion of Iraq destroyed the lives of millions, including many of my dear friends, and unleashed the sectarian hatred that later gave birth to the Islamic State. I recall a conversation with my Iraqi colleague Yanar Mohammed, daughter of a Shiite father and a Sunni mother, and founder of the Organization of Women's Freedom in Iraq. When I asked her what was the most notable legacy of the U.S. invasion of her country, she gave the chilling response: we, Sunnis and Shia, learned to hate each other. In another part of the Middle East, U.S. military support for Israel has wreaked havoc on the lives of Palestinians and aroused the ire of people throughout the region. Continuous U.S. military interventions, from drone warfare in Yemen to overthrowing Muammar Gaddafi in Libya to funneling an endless stream of weapons into the region, have unleashed new levels of violence. But the United States is not the only nation whose massive footprint has been trampling on the lives of people in the Middle East. The other nation is Saudi Arabia, an oppressive monarchy that denies human rights to its own people and exports extremism around the world. It also happens to be the closest U.S. ally in the Arab world. During the 1980s and 1990s, I met intolerant and violent young men in Pakistan and Afghanistan who were trained to hate Westerners in Saudi schools. In 2001, I saw my own nation convulsed by an attack on September 11th that was perpetrated mostly by Saudis. Not hard to connect the dots behind the spread of the Saudi intolerant ideology of Wahhabism, the creation of al-Qaeda and the Islamic State, and the attacks in New York, Paris, Brussels, and San Bernardino. You can also connect the dots between Saudi Arabia and the failure of some of the historic uprisings associated with the Arab Spring, since the Saudi monarchy did not want calls for democracy to threaten its own grip on power. I was in Bahrain after Saudi tanks crushed the inspiring grassroots encampment in Pearl Square, where tens of thousands had gathered day after day to demand democracy. I will never forget the excitement of being in Tahrir Square during the Egyptian Revolution, then watching aghast as a military coup backed by the Saudis put some 40,000 activists behind bars. In Yemen, the Saudis took a direct military role in that nation's internal conflict with a ruthless bombing campaign. When I travel overseas, people often ask me why Saudi Arabia, a country that is so repressive internally and overseas, is such a close ally to the United States. Iranian friends want to know why the U.S. government is so outspoken about human rights violations in Iran, but silent about the worst abuses in the Saudi kingdom. Yemenis want to ask why my government supplies weapons to the very nation, Saudi Arabia, that bombed their schools and hospitals. Saudi women ask why the United States, which professes great democratic values, props up a regime that treats women as second-class citizens. The easy answer is oil, weapon sales, and other business interests. Oil has formed the basis for U.S.-Saudi ties.
The kingdom has become the largest purchaser of American weapons in the world, and hundreds of billions of Saudi petrodollars help shore up the U.S. economy. But there's another reason, perhaps more critical than any of the others. The American people have not demanded an end to this dysfunctional, toxic relationship. Why? In part, because the American people know so little about it. Even Americans who consider them parts of a peace movement know virtually nothing about the kingdom. The Saudi press is muzzled, foreign journalists are strictly monitored, and only tourists visiting for religious purposes are allowed into the country. Add to that a Saudi lobby that lines the pockets of U.S. think tanks, such as the Middle East Institute, Ivy League universities, such as Harvard and Yale, and influential institutions from the Clinton Foundation to the Carter Center. This checkbook diplomacy helps put a happy face on the abusive monarchy and silences its critics. We have a lot to uncover. This book is meant to be a primer, giving readers a basic understanding of how the kingdom holds on to power internally and tries to influence the outside world. It looks at the founding of the Saudi state, the treatment of dissidents, religious minorities, women, and migrant workers, the spread of Wahhabism, the kingdom's relationship with the West, and its role in the region, and what the future might hold. As we delve into the inner workings of this dystopian regime, don't mistake criticism of Saudi Arabia for Islamophobia. This book is not a critique of Islam, but a critique of three intertwining factors that have shaped the Saudi nation: the extremist interpretation of Sunni Islam, known as Wahhabism, the appropriation of the Saudi state by one family, and Western support for this dynasty. Criticizing Saudi Arabia should not be equated with support for Saudi's nemesis, Iran. The Iranian government is guilty of some of the same abuses as the Saudis. Book Kingdom of the Unjust.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
So what's the Trump administration doing in the face of the rise of armed hatred in the United States, weaponized hatred in the United States, whether it's Russian bots or whether it's Republican bots or whether it's Japanese bots? Apparently, they've participated in some of these swarms. What is the Trump administration doing? Laurel Raymond and Alan Pike wrote a piece. This was back last year, but it is still entirely appropriate. I mean, this is from February 3rd. This is right after the nomination or the inauguration of Donald Trump, about 2 weeks later. On Thursday, internet racists celebrated another perceived victory. Reports that President Trump will soon remove white nationalist group from a federal effort to study and neutralize extremist radicalization and rebrand the program to focus solely on groups associating themselves with Islam. The Countering Violent Extremism program partners government agencies with community organizations to prevent people from being radicalized into various types of terror and hate groups. It was designed to encompass not only Muslim communities, but also the American far-right groups that propagandize to people like Dylan Roof. He's the fellow who shot the people in the church in Charlotte, excuse me. News of Trump's plan to reverse that symbolic recognition of right-wing threats prompted a wave of celebration in white nationalist circles. This is from the founder and editor of the neo-Nazi website Daily Stormer. He said, quote, "Donald Trump wants to remove us from undue federal scrutiny by removing white supremacists from the definition of extremism. Yes, this is real life. Our memes are all real life. Donald Trump is setting us free." And then they went on to say, "It's fair to say that the Trump team is not listening to us directly. I assume that if the Trump team is not listening to us directly, I assume that they are. We are thinking along very similar lines. We helped get Trump elected. And the fact of the matter is, without alt-right meme magic, it simply wouldn't have happened. This is absolutely a signal of favor to us. We may truly have underestimated President Trump's covert support of our cause, but after this proposal, I am fully ready to offer myself in service of this glorious regime. Amazingly, my government no longer treats me as an enemy. It's now officially understood at one of the highest levels that we are so much better than the kidnapper, terrorist, pedophile left. So you've got the Nazi right, the hard Nazi right, celebrating Donald Trump, celebrating his election, celebrating his inauguration, and, you know, continuing. We've got this kid who murdered all these students in Parkland, wearing a Make America Great hat, putting swastikas in his books. The alt-right, the Southern Poverty Law Center just come out with a new study. There have been more than 100 people killed or injured by alleged perpetrators influenced by the so-called alt-right, a movement that continues to access the mainstream and reach young recruits. This is a quote from their study. This began in 2014, they're saying. This is just a 3-4-year-old phenomena. The SPLC tracks the rise in alt-right related violence beginning in 2014 when 22-year-old Elliot Rodger murdered 6 people and injured 14 others in Isla Vista, California. Rodger's radicalization began in men's rights forums, which helped stoke his racism, misogyny, and self-loathing. Men's rights typically means white men's rights. The study identifies 13 killers who have collectively killed 43 people and injured 67 others. The SPLC notes that the most conspicuous unifying background trait among these individuals is a history of consuming and or participating in the type of far-right ecosystem that defines the alt-right. You know, we need to be very clear about this. What right-wing movements are. Right-wing movements are authoritarian, hierarchical, patriarchal, and prone to violence. You look at the hard right movements in the Islamic world. There is Al-Qaeda and ISIS. You look at the hard right movements that are growing in Europe, Marine Le Pen and the National Front in France and the new neo-Nazi movements in Poland, Hungary, and Greece. They all associate themselves with militarism, with guns, with violence, with white supremacy, and with male power. And that's what's going on. And these kids in Parkland now, and boys and girls, young men and women, are standing up and saying, no, we don't want to have any part of this. We don't want to be part of this. We want a country that is safe, where children can go to school without fear of being murdered. An Anti-Defamation League report released last month noted that there had been a drastic increase in the amount of white supremacist propaganda, flyers, stickers, banners, and posters appearing on college and university campuses. 2017 was defined as the most violent year in the existence of the alt-right so far. You'll recall back in 2009, a report that was prepared at the direction of George W. Bush when he was president. He left office on January 20th of 2009. And so that report, George Bush's report on the alt-right, on the far right, by the FBI and the Department of Justice was published as Obama was coming into office. The hard right went nuts. Right-wing hate radio, Fox so-called news, all the publications, the networks controlled by billionaires like Fox News, the publications funded by billionaires, all these right-wing ones, they just went ballistic. Oh my God, they're talking about us. You can't talk. And Obama just, to stop the insanity, just said, okay, we're going to pull the report. And so we were never even appropriately warned that hardcore right-wingers, these people who by and large hate people of color, hate women, hate anybody who doesn't gender conform, it's just hate and grievance is their currency. It is the product that they sell, it is the water that they swim in, it is the air that they breathe. Without it, they're nothing. They're pathetic, frightened little people. Without their hate and their fear, without their weapons and their threats, without their bullying. Donald Trump has got to be one of the most frightened people on the planet right now. He's scared to death that we're going to discover that not only is he not rich, he's in debt. He's scared to death that we're going to find out that the only way that he was able to recover from all his bankruptcies was by getting money from oligarchs around the world, including Russia and other former Soviet states. That he's been participating in money laundering operations for years. using his property to do it, sometimes to the benefit of himself. That property down in Florida that he bought for a few $1 million and then sold for a whole bunch of $1 million to a Russian oligarch who was trying to hide money from his wife. You know, basically Trump made millions of dollars in profit off that. I'm sure that wasn't the only one. These are the things, frankly, I believe that are going to bring him down. You know, the efforts to collude with Russia are fairly obvious. You see Don Jr. saying, oh, yeah, this is great. Let's have a meeting with a bunch of Russians and get some dirt on Hillary. That's attempted collusion right there. I mean, there you have a crime. And Donald Trump obviously knew that because he wrote, you know, a memo on Air Force One that lied about it, which is try to cover up a crime. That's everything from suborning perjury to obstruction of justice. So here we have a president who is frightened. You've got an alt-right movement that is frightened. You've got all these young, largely young white men who are seeing women and people of color actually have equal positions or nearly equal positions in society. And they're like, oh my God, there goes my white privilege. And they're lashing out with guns. They're lashing out with violence. And the NRA and the Republican politicians, and a few Democrats, but the vast majority of the Republican politicians that the NRA owns are facilitating this. They have blood on their hands. So the question is, what do we do about it? These young people from Parkland are creating a movement, a hashtag, a logo. I mean, they're doing this. And I believe that all of us need to do everything that we can to support these young people and help this movement grow, because it could save this country.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's coming up on 16 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Glenn in Olivet, Michigan. Hey, Glenn, what's on your mind? Thanks for watching Free Speech.
Hey, Tom, I tell you what, one thing I am so proud of this youth today. I mean, you think about it. When we grew up back in the Vietnam era, you know, we worried about whether or not we was going to graduate and be dropped into a bomb zone. These kids are going to school every day wondering whether or not they're walking into a bomb zone.
Yep.
You know, and these kids speaking out, I mean, taken to the streets, old school, just like, you know, we've done for years in this country. I am so proud of them.
Yeah, me too. I think it's, you know, and a child shall lead them. I think that was in Isaiah, you know, and now that's what we're seeing right now, is a child is, you know, the children are leading us.
They're frustrated. They're frustrated with our generation. How did we get here? What do we do? Why have we got here? And you know, these kids. I mean, these kids should not be dealing with this frustration. We should fix it. You know, we need to fix the problem. And I've told people, I says, you know what? If these kids go to the street, I'm going to stand beside them. I'm going to listen to them. You know, and I think as a country, that's what we need to do. We need to stop playing our party sides. We need to start listening to what's going on.
I think this march that they're planning for Washington, D.C. for March 24th is going to be huge. And in fact,
I hope so.
I need to look at my calendar. Maybe we should even try to get to D.C. for March 24th. It doesn't look like I've got anything on my calendar for that Saturday, but I don't know. In any case, it's a big deal. It's a real big deal, and I think that it's also a good sign for the future of our country, frankly. So, you know, I'm pleased by that. Glenn, thanks a lot for the call. Good to hear from you. Steve in St. Genevieve, Missouri, listening to us on iTunes. Hey, Steve, what's up?
Hey, Tom, first-time caller.
Thank you.
Would you agree that this whole gun slaughtering of the innocent is a health crisis?
Yes.
Okay, now, if it's a health crisis, I think that in order for anyone to purchase a gun, needs to get a prescription from, a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and this is for everybody. Because if it is a health crisis, then why not a prescription?
Well,
and then my next comment, you were saying earlier, you know, a lot of countries they can't own guns. Mexico, for instance, right? Mexico, for example, you can own a gun, but you can only use that gun when hunting season starts, and then the police department issues you your rifle to go hunting. And once you're done hunting, you have to return the rifle and the ammunition.
I didn't know that.
And then I'll take this off the air. Thank you.
Yeah. Steve, remind me your first question.
Sure. Oh, I was saying, you know, if we have a health crisis,
Oh,
with
the
all
health
these
crisis, yeah.
gun slaughters, I think we need a prescription
I got
type of a program.
You know, that's not going to happen. But the interesting thing about the whole health crisis thing is that Congress actually passed a law, Republicans in Congress passed a law, this is called the Dickey Amendment, which makes it illegal for the federal government to investigate the public health consequences of guns in the United States. The CDC was doing some really good studies on this, and the Republicans shut them down. And we really need to repeal the Dickey Amendment, big time. Steve, thanks for the call. Great to hear from you. We'll be right back. Welcome back. 21 minutes past the hour. And Lori in Exeter, New Hampshire. Hey, Lori, what's on your mind? Lori, listening on Sirius XM. You are on the air. You've got to listen to your phone, not your radio. Ron in Berrien Springs, Michigan. Hey, Ron, what's on your mind today?
Hello, Tom. Tom, could we label this latest gunman an NRA gunman? He was trained, I understand, in high school with the NRA funds.
Yeah, the NRA gave a $10,000 grant to the junior ROTC in his school, and he was trained in how to use these weapons by, yeah. Apparently, if the news reports are correct, I'm assuming that they are.
Yes, but more so than that, he, like I said, he was trained by the NRA. He used NRA guidelines, ground rules for acquiring weapons and the use of weapons. And he's a member of the NRA. So can we label?
Do you know that he was an NRA member, Ron?
I don't know that.
Yeah, I don't either. So I'm not willing to say that he was.
Going through the training in high school, can we ask the NRA? Did they supply that those letters?
I seriously doubt they're going to tell you. I seriously doubt that. They're busy, or at least their shills are busy right now attacking these kids. I mean, you got these billionaire-funded right-wing websites and corporate-funded right-wing websites that are literally, I mean, they found some kid named Nicholas Cruz in Florida, or some man named Nicholas Cruz, not the one who was the shooter. He spelled his name differently, and he has a different middle name, but he's a registered Democrat. Now, this Nicholas Cruz, I'm not even sure he's registered to vote. He spells his name with a K, not a C, and a completely different person, completely different address. But Gateway Pundit has been running these, oh my God, this breathless, we found, oh, look at this, the shooter was a Democrat. And it's rolling across the right-wing ecosystem, the right-wing hate system. It's just incredible. And, expect more. The truth doesn't matter to these people. The only thing that matters is winning an argument on behalf of the people who are lining their pockets. It really just comes down to that. Ron, I gotta move along, but thank you for the call. Christopher in Battleground, Washington. Hey, Christopher, what's up?
Hey, Tom.
Yeah.
God, great to hear. Great to hear you. My first caller, and thank you for all you do. You're fabulous, and I have donated to Free Speech TV as well.
Thank you, Christopher, for it all. It's not necessary, but appreciate it. What's on your mind today?
Hey, I went to a town hall meeting for our state senator this Saturday, last Saturday, and I had her voting record in front of me, and one of her voting records was that she, SB 6471, she voted no to ban bump stocks. And the reason why, she said, is because there's two revelations I learned from this meeting. This, first of all, was the fact that she said, you can make a bump stock out of a rubber band or a belt. So should we ban rubber bands and belts?
I don't know. I mean, yeah, you can make a parachute out of hundreds of stitched together nylon stockings too. I mean, you know, just because you can make something doesn't mean that it works. Doesn't mean that it works efficiently. I would be amazed if somebody could make a bump stock with a belt and a rubber band that actually got more than 2 or 3 shots off before it jammed a weapon.
That's what I thought too, and I didn't have the chance to follow up on them and say, the Las Vegas victims' families, what would they prefer that the guy used, a rubber band or a bump stock?
Right.
So, but that was amazing. That's a revelation because I've never heard that before.
Yeah, well, the message is, the real message there, Christopher, is we can't do anything about it. And here's the BS excuse why we can't do anything about it. But the real message is, you know, well, I didn't do anything because we can't do anything because it won't matter. And this is such a nonsense argument. These people who come on TV going, well, you know, when guns are outlawed, only outlaws will have guns. You know, what are you saying? Do away with all criminal laws? You know, let's, you know, there's still, yeah, somebody robbed a bank here in Oregon just a week or so ago. Does that mean that we should just, you know, hey, they're still robbing banks? Why do we have these stupid laws on the books to prevent robbing banks?
Well, it's absurd. And the other thing that I learned from her, she mentioned that the AR-15 is the choice of the gun of choice for women.
What?
And I swear, I couldn't make this up. I didn't make this up. I swear I was there. And I said, she said, because it's light, it shoots, it's more accurate than a handgun. And she exclaimed that she prefers to have a shotgun by her bed. But I've never heard that stuff before.
Yeah.
I mean, this is, so we might be hearing this.
Yeah.
We might be hearing
no,
this.
they're coming. They're desperate. They're coming out with all kinds of weird crap. But anyhow, let's see here, 2654. Yeah, it is, Christopher. It is pathetic, and this is, you're hearing the last gasps of a dinosaur, a dying dinosaur, which is the so-called gun rights movement in the United States, and the billionaires and the big weapons manufacturers who support it. So, you know, stick around. I think I've got a caller here who says he's part of a student group leading a protest. I'm looking forward to that call from Joe right after the break here at the bottom of the hour. It's coming up on 28 minutes past the hour. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, your media support group for we the people, supporting democracy in our republic. 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, right here. Stick around.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with more of the news of the day and your calls right after this.
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club today. Take a break from politics. We're reading from Dr. Neil Bernard's book, The Get Healthy, Go Vegan Cookbook. And this is from the introduction. This book holds the culinary secrets to lifelong health. These 125 easy and delicious recipes will lure you with their aromas and flavors, many familiar, some new. But what awaits you is more than simply a treat for the taste buds. These recipes are powerful. They will help you trim down, lower your cholesterol, bring your blood sugar and blood pressure under control, and get your energy back. And if you're healthy now, these wonderful foods will help you stay that way. As it stands, most people are not eating very well. In North America, our dietary staples are not vegetables, fruits, brown rice, or other healthful foods. No, for many people, a meal is not a meal unless there's a big chunk of meat in the middle of the plate. A little pile of green beans or corn tossed in as an afterthought. That was the way it was when I grew up, and I suspect something similar may be true for you too. As a result of our less than healthful eating habits, Americans tend to be heavier than people from other countries. And perhaps surprisingly, we do not live as long as they do. Even with our high-tech medical care, Americans are likely to be felled by heart attacks, cancer, diabetes, or other problems. Our lives are about 4 years shorter on average compared with the people of Japan, where the dietary staples are reversed. Rice, noodles, and vegetables are mainstays, while meat serves traditionally just as a flavoring. And our quality of life suffers too. We are less able to work, dance, or play tennis in our later years, and some are more likely to be on medications or in the hospital. And things are worsening year by year. Back in the 1960s, bacon and eggs showed up at breakfast, and roast beef and gravy were on America's dinner plates. Lunch may or may not have been another meaty meal. And then McDonald's arrives, as did Burger King, Wendy's, and Pizza Hut. They were not selling broccoli, carrots, and asparagus sushi. They were not selling, even in the smallest cities, these fast food restaurants ushered in a load of meat, cheese, and soda that pushed fat and calories to unprecedented levels in our diets. Here are the numbers. When the federal government began keeping records in 1909, the average American ate about 124 pounds of meat a year. By 1970, that figure had soared to over 175 pounds. As the new millennium arrived, the figure burst through the 200-pound per person per year mark. A century ago, the average American ate less than 4 pounds of cheese in an entire year. By 2009, that figure was over 33 pounds, thanks to cheeseburgers, cheese pizza, and cheese on just about everything else. Sugar intake has risen by about 20 pounds per person per year just since 1970. In other words, our eating habits were never very good in North America, but in recent decades, they've gotten a whole lot worse. An ever-increasing load of meat, cheese, and sugar makes weight problems inevitable. Today, 2/3 of Americans are beyond the boundaries of a healthy weight, and American children are in the worst shape of any generation in the history of our nation. The results are not just apparent on the bathroom scale. They also show up in unprecedented numbers of people lining up in pharmacies to buy diet aids, insulin, cholesterol-lowering drugs, and blood pressure medication. And the problem is not limited to North America. India, China, and much of the rest of the world, where healthy grains and vegetables have historically played major roles, now follow America's lead, loading up on burgers and pizza. And as Western dietary habits spread worldwide, Western diseases like cancer and diabetes follow right along. The answer is to take advantage of the food our bodies are designed for. Vegetables and fruits provide beta-carotene and lycopene to help shore up our body's defenses against cancer, along with thousands of other nutrients with health power that cannot be matched by meat-based diets. Whole grains and beans are loaded with fiber to help trim our waistlines and cut cholesterol, not to mention plenty of protein, iron, and calcium. By setting aside animal-derived products, meat, dairy products, and eggs, you can reach a level of health and well-being that you may never have expected that you could enjoy. At the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine in Washington, D.C., we conduct research projects to study how foods affect health. We also sponsor educational programs to help people change their eating habits and improve their health. Some of the people who participate in our program simply want to expand their repertoire of healthful foods. Others have a few pounds they'd like to lose. Many have a lot of pounds to lose, not to mention fairly serious health problems that they really have to conquer. And yet so many people do not know about the power of healthful eating. That's why we wrote this book. We want to help people understand how fueling the body with the right foods can lead to an enormous health payoff. We aim to provide a menu that is as close to perfect as humanly possible. And we hope to show how easy it is to prepare truly healthy foods and what a delight it can be to serve them to family and friends. I am a physician. After completing medical school and residency at George Washington University in Washington, D.C., I began my professional life as a psychiatrist, helping people overcome serious behavioral problems. Later, I had a major career change. Having led several research studies on diet and health, I am now an adjunct associate professor of medicine at the Department of Internal Medicine at George Washington University School of Medicine. I also head the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, which promotes healthful diets and conducts research, and also promotes ethical research pushes for improved food policies, and hosts many information-packed websites that I hope you will visit. The Get Healthy, Go Vegan cookbook by Dr. Neil Bernard, MD.
At thomhartmann.com/podcast. They're commercial free, and you can listen anytime, any place you want. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Joe in Bethpage, New York. Hey, Joe, thanks for watching us on YouTube. What's on your mind today?
Hey, how are you, Tom?
Well.
So, I'm a senior at Plainridge High School here on Long Island, New York. And we are, like many other schools around the nation, April 20th, we are staging a walkout during the school day.
Cool.
10 a.m., April 20th at 10 a.m., we're going to be walking out for 17 minutes and then respectfully walking back into the school. And out of respect for the 17 lives lost in Florida this past week. And, I was just calling for two things. First off, I just want to voice the, absolute necessity of people to, stand up, say something, make a change, and try to be leaders in their community. Because if there's no one around to do that, and if people think they can't change things, then things won't change. We need people. We need young people. We need old people. We need everyone to stand up and say, when they've had enough, that enough is enough.
Amen.
And to change things. And second off, I was wondering if you have any, advice for us. Perhaps we're trying to get our movement off the ground, trying to inform other schools. And we're, I think right now is we're actually trying to have our teachers union support us, whether they join us or however they want to do it. We strongly believe in unions, and especially the teachers union.
Yeah, that's great. Joe, I'm not sure which union represents your teachers. Randy Weingarten, who is the head of one of the big teachers unions, is a friend of mine, and I know that she's totally supportive of this and what she's doing. I'd be surprised if the other large union isn't also. I'm sorry, I mixed the names of them up, so I'm not going to blow it by saying them. But Joe, after a little bit of this conversation, I'd like to ask you what your friends are saying and to what extent you think that this is, broad and deep as opposed to, shallow or narrow in terms of support. But you asked my advice. The number one piece of advice that I think that I could give you from having been part of student protests in the 60s and 70s, from having been an observer of the political scene for years and years, is to learn from Donald Trump. Trump was once asked what his favorite book was, and he said it was P.T. Barnum's The Art of Money Making. P.T. Barnum famously knew how to get press. And he's also, famously said there's no such thing as bad press. And what Trump does is the strategy that they're employing is called flooding the zone, which is, every day, sometimes 4 or 5 times a day, throw stuff out there that is so outrageous and so high profile that the press can't ignore it. Now, I'm not suggesting that you specifically do that, but political theater is powerful stuff. Cindy Sheehan nearly brought down George W. Bush, certainly damaged his reputation simply by following him around with a bullhorn. George Herbert Walker Bush, I remember that election very well when he ran against Dukakis against Bill Clinton in 1992. And one of the main things that the Clinton campaign used to destroy George Herbert Walker Bush was this a guy in a chicken outfit who followed him around. And it became big news. And it made him look like a complete fool. And so, the Billionaires for Bush, it was great theater. It continues, where where young people dress up in tuxedos and the ladies in gowns and rent a limousine and then have a champagne bottle and glasses and they go to Republican events and just ridicule the Republicans. None of these are the specific suggestions that I have, Joe, but what I do know is that if you just do kind of standard normal stuff, hey, we're going to have a meeting on Thursday at the VFW, please show up, or hey, we're going to march down Main Street on Saturday at 1 o'clock, odds are you're not going to get much coverage. But if you can think of ways that ironically or humorously, or even angrily, but irony and humor really work best, demonstrate the point you're trying to make. The young people yesterday who did a die-in in front of the White House, 17 people, laid down dead for 17 minutes in front of the White House yesterday. That got the nation's attention. That caught the national news cycle. So it's like looking for that edge, looking for something that a copy editor or an assignment editor is going to say, oh, this will be interesting. There's a human interest piece here, and there's, people are going to smile, or they're going to laugh, or they're going to be horrified, or they're going to get angry, but you're going to get a response. It's not just another damn data point. It's not just a meeting or a publication or something like that. So that's my advice. Joe, I'm curious what your peers are saying. In adult circles, it seems that Republicans are very, very well entrenched in this idea that, guns then, guns now, guns forever. I'm wondering if their kids are feeling that way.
I think the consensus is clear against, almost every demographic in America. There are people in our school, students and teachers who, think that, they're on the opposite side of the table. Of the aisle, rather, and they think nothing's wrong, but nothing needs to change. But a majority of people, so many students, the teachers, the students. When we first announced this, we had 300 people sign up within 3 hours, like pledging their support. We had the teachers, all the teachers I have spoke to. My friends' parents who are teachers, family members, they all, seem to be agreeing. Well, first off, with what we're doing, but they agree. They know that what's going on politically with the Republicans, with the NRA, with campaign election reform. Some people may know less, some people know more, but they all agree something's not right.
People are woke.
Yeah.
Well, that's good news. Joe, one other thing just popped to mind. Back in the, I guess it was the late 60s, Bobby Seale and Huey Newton went to, Ronald Reagan was governor of California, and he was and California was open carry. It was an open carry state. There were basically no gun laws in California at the time. And so perfectly legally, Bobby Seale and Huey Newton, there was a group of 8th graders who were meeting with Ronald Reagan on the steps of the Capitol to have a picnic. It was a photo op for them. And so Bobby Seale, Huey Newton, and a half a dozen of their friends pull up in front of the state Capitol, get out of their car. Each one of them is carrying like, an M1, a shotgun, and a pistol. They're just loaded to the teeth.
Right.
And they walk up, and Bobby Seale pulls out a proclamation and reads it from the steps of the Capitol, and then they walk into the Capitol building with their guns. That so flipped out Ronald Reagan that afternoon he gave a speech calling for gun control, and Republican State Senator Mumford introduced legislation the next day to ban guns in California, and it was passed the next week. All it took was some, scary black people, in quotes, carrying guns around. I'm not suggesting that you do that, and I'm not sure exactly how that should play out. And I know that you've got fairly strict gun laws there in New York State where you live, which wouldn't be the case in Oklahoma, for example, where you might have different tactics applied. But that's the sort of thing. That's the sort of guerrilla theater, political theater that really can produce rapid change. So, for what it's worth.
Right.
Okay. Joe, thanks for the call. Can you call us every week or two and let us know how it's going?
Yeah, you got it. No problem. Absolutely.
Great. Thanks. I look forward to hearing from you, Joe. You are the future. You're the people we've been waiting for. And thank you so much for your activism and for your call. Great to hear from you. Jack in Salisbury. Got to click the button first. Jack in Salisbury, North Carolina. Hey, Jack, what's up?
Hi, Tom. First-time caller, proud Southern liberal, former infantry officer. And after hearing that young man, my topic's a little weak, but you were talking about the swamp fox earlier, and he actually was a colonel in the South Carolina militia during the Revolutionary War that essentially conducted a fairly successful guerrilla campaign against the British.
Aha.
So that's where that came from.
Yeah, I thought swamp fox was a positive rather than a negative appellation, label, tag, name, whatever.
Yeah, it wasn't Southerners, and I just want to let you know there is lots of islands of Southern liberals down here, like in Chapel Hill, where I lived for a while, and Asheville, where I lived for a while, and here in Salisbury, we just had our local elections, and we elected the first black mayor of Salisbury ever, who's a woman too, by the way, and we also elected a young lesbian business person here to the city council. So,
cool.
And that happened through several other communities here in North Carolina. So we're a swing state here, and so don't give up on the entire South. There's we voted for Obama in 2008, and we definitely we just barely went for Trump.
Yeah. Nixon's Southern strategy caused the South to flip Republican, and the single issue that it turned on was racism. And, the Republicans embraced racism in a big way. I think that is fading. I think their ability to use that has been diluted, in part by the demographic changes in the country. And they're left with nothing. They're left with nothing but outrage. Jack, thanks for the call. Great to hear from you.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of the news of the day, your calls, and my thoughts on all the above. Also, we're going to check in with Talk Media News in about 4 minutes. Stick around. And welcome back. Tina watching Free Speech TV in Grand Marais, Minnesota.
Hooray.
Am I saying that right?
Hooray, like Illinois.
Oh, okay. Marinay. Okay. Or Marier.
I'm calling because I wanted to believe as a child that we had a nation, society of peace. And during the time I was growing up, we had Korea, we had Vietnam, and we had growing military bases all over the world.
Right, and right now we're engaged in, I think, 12 active shooting conflicts around the world.
Yes, and I feel like we have become the aggressor in worldwide.
Oh yeah, George Bush put us in that position when he illegally invaded both Afghanistan and Iraq.
And I'm thinking, my entire life, we have been at war somewhere, even though we didn't call it war.
Yep.
And so, I'm, they want people to go in the military, and the industry that creates all of the bombs and the weapons and all of this. It's like living almost in a police state. And I think that creates the violence that we see on the local level. I mean, it's just pervasive.
It doesn't help, and it certainly empowers rogue cops. I do think, though, that if you look at state-by-state statistics, you see that there is a huge difference in the number of people who are killed by guns, and in mass shootings for that matter, in the states that have gun control laws like California and New York, and Connecticut in particular. It's got the strongest gun control laws in the country. And states that have functionally no gun control laws, Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, states like that, where the gun rates, the gun death violences levels are much, much higher. All of those states live in the same larger country. All of those states are contributing their share of everything from tax dollars to cannon fodder soldiers to the war efforts.
I also feel that, you know, Russia is less aggressive than we are all over the world.
Yeah, I think Russia.
I grew up thinking that Khrushchev believed in peace, a piece of this, a piece of that, a piece of this, a piece of that.
Yeah.
But we are the ones doing it.
I'm sorry, say that again?
We are the ones doing it. We are out to control the entire world.
It seems.
I don't
mean,
understand
Russia's big moment was Ukraine. You know, it was Crimea and eastern Ukraine, and we really participated in that, and they're smarting about that. And I'm guessing that's probably part of their motivation to mess with our elections, but I don't know. But
how many bases does Russia have all over the world?
I don't know.
I don't think anybody has the military.
Well, they have a few. I mean, they've got a military
the
base in Syria right now that they're trying to protect.
Yeah, well, that's one.
It's their deep water port there. So yeah, they do, but you know, they only have, for example, one aircraft carrier. We have a whole bunch of them. In fact, I think we're the only country in the world with more than one.
We have become the evil empire.
Well, we've become the empire, and our goal, our job, Tina, as American citizens, is to strip the evil out of it, and maybe the empire out of it. I get what you're saying. Thanks for the call, Tina, and thanks for watching us there in Minnesota. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Luke Vargas is with us with Talk Media News. This report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Loving What You Do, Ellen Ratner's new book. Luke, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Tom.
I should add, Luke is the chief foreign correspondent for Talk Media News based at the UN headquarters in New York. You can follow him on Twitter at The Courier. The UN Security Council played host to a showdown today between Jared Kushner and Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority. What was this all about, and how is Jared Kushner's role in the Middle East going to be changed now that he no longer has access to classified information if John Kelly's proclamation actually applies to him?
Well, I'd also point out that it seems like the fact that the Palestinians don't consider Jared Kushner to be a legitimate intermediary on the peace talks hasn't prompted the Trump administration to take him out of that role either. So it remains to be seen.
Yeah. This is a kid who literally grew up with Bibi Netanyahu staying in the guest room in his house when he was a little kid.
Yeah. Well, look, Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian president, these are basically monthly meetings that occur at the UN Security Council on the Palestinian question. Sometimes they're heated. Sometimes they're not. Of course, the ones at the very end of last year got pretty testy because of the U.S. decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of the Israeli state. Then it sort of calmed down in January and then back again with a vengeance in February because both sides here, sort of the U.S. side and the Palestinian side, decided to bring their senior officials to this. So you had the Palestinian president there. You had Mr. Greenblatt, Trump's sort of envoy to international negotiations, and Kushner, the representative of the peace process, were all in the council today. Kushner and Greenblatt didn't talk. That was Nikki Haley who did the talking. Mahmoud Abbas did give a speech in which he basically said that the U.S. has proved itself incapable of being a neutral arbiter of this crisis. That's sort of an old criticism. What he says now is that the only way to sort of rekindle the peace process is to cut the U.S. out of it, or at least greatly minimize their role. And he's calling for a major international multilateral peace conference to be convened this summer, basically getting rid of the role of the United States as the sole arbiter and putting the United Nations in its role. And the reasons to do that are many. I mean, of course, there are many more countries in the world who, believe Palestine to be a legitimate state. And the idea is shift this out of the bilateral setting, get it into a multilateral setting where Palestine has broad support, and that's going to be a much more friendly environment. It's still probably a non-starter, but that's the big call coming from Abbas today.
Yeah, remarkable. North Korea, there's a cybersecurity firm here in the United States that says they're stepping up their international cyber hacking efforts. Do you envision, or do the people who wrote this report, for that matter, envision a time when, if we seriously piss off Kim Jong-un, that he might just shut down the water supply to New York, shut down the subways or the metro or the trains in Chicago, turn off the lights in Los Angeles? I mean, is that kind of capability what is envisioned here, or is this more, more ransomware that's going to bust up hospitals and cause them to have to give a whole bunch of Bitcoin to North Korea?
It's the latter. It's very possible that other elements of the North Korean sort of cyber hacking, department could be focused on that sort of malicious, more kind of terrorist attack style cyber attacks. But what we've actually seen much more frequently are sort of cyber hacks that aim to extort money. I mean, remember the WannaCry attack last year in May of 2017, targeted various computers that were operating Microsoft Windows and then asked for Bitcoin cryptocurrency payments in return. What we're hearing now is that that there is a group subordinate to the group that carried out the Sony hack and the WannaCry attack that used to be focused just on sort of going after defectors of the regime, targeting politicians within South Korea, that in the past year has had a change in directive, that they've now been instructed to go and look around the world for potential new targets. This report didn't detail any, exploratory targeting of American entities, though perhaps they are aware of that and just are withholding it from the public. But they are going after targets in Japan, the Middle East, and Vietnam, including those from the United Nations who are pushing North Korea on human rights and sanctions. And the idea is now that they're going to be looking for these targets, and then they're going to hand that info over to other hackers within North Korea who will then try to extort those individuals. So it seems pretty clear this is a fundraising mechanism for a regime that needs money and needs to find new targets.
And in our final 40 seconds, a new report recommends 20,000 UN peacekeepers keep the peace in eastern Ukraine. That would be sure to piss off Vladimir Putin. I mean, what's going on with this?
It would be. The idea is you basically get non-NATO European countries and then some sort of countries in the Russian orbit like Belarus, and you try to compromise that way. The biggest news is that Sweden over the weekend said they might be willing to lead up this peacekeeping mission, which, if confirmed, would be a big win for the possibility this actually comes to fruition. But again, it seems unlikely Russia would sign off on anything too big and with too broad of a mandate.
Does Russia view Sweden as a neutral actor?
It's unclear. They haven't responded yet to this, but Vladimir Putin in general wants a much smaller mission than what Sweden seems like it's willing to sign up for.
Sure. Very interesting. Luke Vargas with Talk Media News. You can tweet him at The Courier. Luke, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Tom. Talk to you soon.
Good talking with you. We'll be back with more of the program. Did you know that just the extra money that America's billionaires made last year, just the extra money, is enough to end poverty worldwide 7 times over?
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Undercommons, Fugitive Planning and Black Study by Stefano Harney and Fred Moten. This is from the introduction. It starts with love, exchange, fellowship. It ends as it begins, in motion, in between various modes of being and belonging, and on the way to new economies of giving, taking, being with and for. And it ends with a ride in a Buick Skylark on a way to another place altogether. Surprising, perhaps, after we have engaged dispossession, debt, dislocation, and violence, but not surprising when you have understood that the projects of Fugitive Plan and Black Study are mostly about reaching out to find connection. They are about making common cause with the brokenness of being. A brokenness, I would venture to say, that is also blackness, that remains blackness, and will, despite all, remain broken, because this book is not a prescription for repair. If we do not seek to fix what has been broken, then what? How do we resolve to live with brokenness, with being broke, which is also what Moten and Harney called debt? Well, given that debt is sometimes a history of giving, at other times a history of taking, at all times a history of capitalism, and given that debt also signifies a promise of ownership but never delivers on that promise, we have to understand that debt is something that cannot be paid off. Debt, as Harney puts it, presumes a kind of individualized realization to a naturalized economy that is predicated upon exploitation. Can we have, he asks, another sense of what is owed that does not presume a nexus of activities like recognition and acknowledgement, payment and gratitude? Can debt become a principle of elaboration? Moten links economic debt to the brokenness of being in the interview with Stefan Shukatis, who he acknowledges that some debts should be paid and that much is owed, especially to black people, by white people. And yet he says, I also know that it is, that what it is that is supposed to be repaired is irreparable. It can't be repaired. The only thing we can do is tear this stuff down completely and build something new, end of quote. The Undercommons do not come to pay their debts, to repair what has been broken, to fix what has been undone. If you want to know what the Undercommons wants, what Moten and Harney want, what black people, indigenous people, queers, and poor people want, what we, the we who cohabit in the space of the Undercommons, want, it is this. We cannot be satisfied with the recognition and acknowledgement generated by the very system that denies A, that anything was ever broken, and B, that we deserve to be the broken part. So we refuse to ask for recognition, and instead we want to take apart, dismantle, tear down that structure right now. That right now limits our ability to find each other, to see beyond it, and to access the places that we know live outside its walls. We cannot say what new structures will replace the ones we live with yet, because once we have torn stuff down, we will inevitably see more and see differently and feel a new sense of wanting and being and becoming. What we want after the break will be different from what we think we want before the break, and both are necessarily different from the desires that issue from being in the dark. Let's come at this by another path. In the melancholic and visionary 2009 film version of Maurice Sendak's Where the Wild Things Are, 1963, Max, the small seeker who leaves his room, his home, his family to find the world beyond, finds a world of lost and lonely beasts, and they promptly make him their king. Max is the first king the wild things have had, whom they did not eat, and who did not, in turn, try to eat them. And the beasts are the first grown things that Max has met who want his opinion, his judgment, and his rule. Max's power is that he is small while they are big. He promises the beasts that he has no plans to eat them, and that this is more than anyone has ever promised them. He promises them that he will find ways through and around and will slip through the cracks and re-crack the cracks if they fill up. He promises to keep sadness at bay and to make the world with the wild creatures that roared their terrible roars and gnashed their terrible teeth and rolled their terrible eyes and showed their terrible claws. That Max fails to make the wild things happy or to save them or to make the world with them is less important than the fact that he found them and he recognized in them the end of something and potentially the path to an alternative in his world, or an alternative to his world, excuse me. The wild things were not the utopian creatures of fairy tales. They were the rejected and lost subjects of the world Max had left behind. And because he shuttles between the Oedipal land where his mother rules and the ruined world of the wild, he knows the parameters of the real. He sees what is included and what is left out. And he is now able to set sail for another place, a place that is neither the home he left nor the home to which he wants to return. Moten and Harney want to gesture to another place, a wild place that is not simply the leftover space that limbs real and regulated zones of polite society. Rather, it is a wild place that continuously produces its own unregulated wilderness. The zone we enter through Moten and Harney is ongoing and exists in the present, and as Harney puts it, some kind of demand is already being enacted, fulfilled in the call itself. While describing the riots of London in 2011, Harney suggests that the riots and insurrections do not separate out the request, the demand, and the call. Rather, they enact the one in the other. The book is The Undercommons, Fugitive Planning and Black Study. The resource states
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Breaking news. In Ohio, a student in a middle school has apparently committed suicide or attempted to commit suicide with a gun in the school restroom. They've got the school locked down now and some of the schools around it. And in Florida, Scott Dworkin is tweeting this with video. I'm surprised it's not being picked up by the networks. But, hey, it doesn't look good for the NRA, and the NRA funnels tens of millions of dollars to the television networks in the form of paid advertising. So, maybe they're reluctant to point it out. But over 1,000 students just walked out of West Boca High School. And this is literally just a few minutes ago or an hour ago. Over 1,000 students just walked out of West Boca High, tweets Scott Dworkin, and are heading towards Stoneman Douglas High School. Other high schools are apparently following suit. Hashtag gun reform now. So, we'll see where this goes, but it looks interesting. It looks like something is actually going to happen here. And a fine thing that would be. A few other things that I wanted to share with you, and then I'll get to your calls. Shelley Hagan over at Bloomberg wrote an absolutely brilliant piece. It's short. The global economy created a record number of billionaires last year, and this is based on an Oxfam report. The world now has over 2,000 billionaires. The group of mostly men saw its wealth surge by $762 billion. Just last year, the 2,000 billionaires in the world had their wealth increase by $726 billion. That's enough money to end all extreme poverty in the world 7 times, or every year for the next 7 years. According to Bloomberg, the top 500 billionaires' net worth grew 24% to $5.3 trillion. And Jeff Bezos himself just last year made an additional $33 billion. Winnie Banyama, executive director of Oxfam International, says the billionaire boom is not a sign of a thriving economy, but a symptom of a failing economic system. Amen. Meanwhile, looking at what what kinds of problems could these things be presenting, these economic changes that we're seeing? What kind of problems could they be presenting to the United States and the world? Chuck Butler, who writes for the Aiden Forecast, one of the underwriters of this program, they do an investment newsletter every week. Actually, you get a short version. Every month you get a long 12-page version. He does a daily newsletter for Aiden Forecast. And in today's news, and he's just an amazing guy. He's down in Florida. He's having serious cancer treatment, and every day, you know, all kinds of upbeat about the weather and his life and how he's doing. But in any case, he's writing about debt. And this should really wake us all up. He says the St. Louis Fed just issued a report that tracks households' net worth as a percentage of disposable personal income. So, you know, how much money do you have left over after you pay your bills versus how much debt do you have? And this is a really accurate measure of basically resilience. The higher the number, the worse, the less resilient we are, the less able we are to deal with things like a stock market crash, an economy crash, unemployment, somebody getting sick and not being, you know, fully insured, those kinds of things. And he says, so in the past 18 years, we've been above the 600% of household new worth, 600% level, just twice. In other words, 2 times our debt has exceeded our cash by an order of 600%. And he says the 2 years that happened were 2000, which of course was followed by the dot-com bust, stock market bursting, and 2007, which of course was followed in 2008 by the market melting down and the whole world freezing up. He said, well, 2018 now, right now, those 2 years it hit 600%. In 2018, right now, as we speak, it sits today at 680%. He says, hey, I don't make this stuff up, folks. It's right there on the St. Louis Fed's website. And meanwhile, Americans don't seem to be concerned about this or about the fact that our government is dysfunctional or anything else. As long as the Fed and the Treasury Department keep pouring money into the economy, borrowing it, but pouring it in, everybody figures, the stock market will continue to go up, things are good, you know, I'll have a job, etc. Consumer confidence is actually soaring. The Consumer Confidence Index in the United States, which was at 95.7 last year, which is insanely high. I mean, you know, it was below 50% in 2008. It's typically around 70, 80%. The consumer confidence level just hit 99.9%. If that is not an indicator of a major bubble, I don't know what is. Meanwhile, Politico is reporting, this is Zachary Warmbrod, that the Republicans in the U.S. Senate are planning to mark a 10th anniversary of Wall Street's meltdown with, quote, a gift to the nation's banks, a bill that would unravel regulation put in place just after the crisis. Now, this is not entirely a Republican effort. Heidi Heitkamp and John Tester, Democrats in the Senate, are in favor of this. Senator Warren, Elizabeth Warren, and Sherrod Brown are totally opposed to this. And you know, this, they write that the legislation is coming a decade after the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression has fueled passions around the debate. Gee, you think? I mean, so you know, let's just cut some slack to the bankers. The legislation approved by the Senate Banking Committee last year has also racked other critics among Democrats, including Kirsten Gillibrand of New York and Kamala Harris of California. They're opposing this, but it's being led by Sherrod Brown. And although there's a couple of really big banks in Ohio, Fifth Third Bancorp and KeyCorp, who are not happy with this. So we'll see what happens. Maybe we can get Sherrod Brown on and ask him, you know, his thoughts on this. And finally, my piece over on Alternet is still up today. The headline, Thom Hartmann, we live in a country that has a totally corrupted political system. And I point out that as recently as the 1980s, before the impact of the Buckley decision in '76 and Reaganomics, the introduction of Reaganomics in '81 became visible, became apparent, people still understood how corrupt politics could become and how individual business people could corrupt politicians. I used the story of Robert B. Parker's book, The Widening Gyre. I mentioned this yesterday, but I think it bears repeating. Lewis Powell wrote this memo basically to his friend Eugene Sindor, who is the president of the Chamber of Commerce and his next door neighbor, and said, you know, we've basically got to take over the courts, we've got to take over the colleges, we've got to create think tanks to get a business-friendly point of view out there. We've got to stop this Ralph Nader stuff, this Rachel Carlson stuff, this Silent Spring stuff. You know, we've got to liberate the companies and the banks and the billionaires and lock down the middle class. And all my words, not his, but that was the functional equivalent of it. And out of that came the Federalist Society, the Heritage Foundation, the Cato Institute, all these other things that we're all chanting. Corporate personhood is real, as Mitt Romney said. Mitt Romney, by the way, who trashes Trump, then kisses him, then trashes him, then kisses him. He's kissing him again. Mitt Romney, the king of flip-flops. He wants to be the senator from Utah. Anyhow, corporate personhood is real. Money is speech. Democracy is not sacred. And organized money should always have privilege over organized people. This is what's going on. And we all know it. And the young people, you know, in Florida know it too. And they're calling it out for what it is. It's corruption. We'll be back with your calls after this. Stick around.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Back with more in just a moment. And welcome back. George watching Free Speech TV in Minden, Nevada. Hey, George, what's up?
Yeah, Tom, long-time listener and watcher, first-time caller.
Thank you, George.
Yeah, I mean, you've done a great job, and I really appreciate it. I grew up in a gun culture. We growing up, actually hunted to put food on the table, fished to put food on the table. And what's happened to that culture, I don't know. You know, growing up, when I became 12, I had to go take an NRA class so that I could get a hunting license. Prior to that, I didn't need that class. And I'm just wondering if it would be possible now to institute something like that. I mean, you have to go get you have to take a test. You have to take a written test and a driving test to be able to operate an automobile.
Right.
Why shouldn't we be able to do that, institute some sort of a law that in order to operate a gun, we need to take some sort of a class, possibly take a written test. The application that you fill out now to buy a gun, I mean, you know, it asks you whether you're insane, whether you beat your wife, you know, and it asks a bunch of inane questions that I imagine that the FBI has some sort of a database on. But, you know, the people lie, really?
Yeah.
You know.
So,
at any rate, I was just hoping that you'd have some sort of a comment or some way to institute something like that.
Yeah, you know, it's very simple stuff. First of all, for years and years, George, I have been saying that we need to treat guns just like cars. The 3 steps with a car. Number 1, it's registered at the time of manufacture, and that registration and VIN number follows it until it's destroyed. And so there's always a clear chain of custody. Number 2, you have to prove that you're proficient at driving, both a written test and an actual performance test. Same thing should be true of guns. And number 3, you have to have liability insurance if you're going to drive a car. You should have to have liability insurance if you're going to shoot a gun. That third part, by the way, has been picked up by a number of conservatives. I've been preaching this for years, and just last week I heard a conservative on Fox News, of all places, arguing my position. And his argument was that this is a free market solution. That, you know, right now with car insurance, if you've got a couple of DUIs, you're going to lose your car insurance, or it's going to become so absurdly expensive that you can't afford it. And that's going to take you off the road. You're going to stop driving. Similarly, if somebody had domestic violence in their background, well, first of all, they may not qualify for the license. But let's just say somebody's a high-risk person. They've been arrested a couple of times, for bar fights or something. Odds are the insurance companies are not going to, their price is going to go from $30 a year to $3,000 a year for their gun insurance. So, I agree with you, and I think dealing with cars or guns like cars is a really ideal thing. The second thing is, we already know that gun control works in the United States. We've had gun control since the 1930s around fully automatic weapons, Tommy guns, machine guns. They're illegal. You can't find them. They're very hard to buy. We should apply, although they are legal, you just have to pay a $200 fee and jump through a 14-page application and send in your fingerprints and your photos to the ATF and the FBI for approval. I mean, it's a fairly lengthy process. I believe that, I'm fine with the revolvers and bolt action and break action rifles, but I believe that with semi-automatic handguns and rifles, we should regulate them the same as we do fully automatic ones. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Sue in Beaver Dam, Wisconsin. Hey, Sue, I thought that Scott Walker had successfully blocked all the special elections. It says here you want to call about an election in Wisconsin today?
Yeah, this isn't a special election, and he did block 2 special elections. We have 2 districts that the representatives went to work in his administration, and he is not going to hold those re-elections. But so we do have some issues there. But we have a Wisconsin Supreme Court primary today. And that's what I'm calling to encourage Wisconsinites to try to get out and vote. Weather in Wisconsin's horrible today, but I did some calling for our Revolution Wisconsin last night, and I was really surprised on how many people were not even aware that the election was taking place. So we do have a candidate being endorsed by our Revolution, as well as Tim Burns, as well as Mark Pocan is endorsing him as well. So for those of us progressives in the state, we have a really good candidate. And with low registration, every vote, or low participation, every vote really, really counts. So
yeah, it counts 5 or 10 times more than it might otherwise, or at least 2 or 3.
You betcha.
Yeah. So what's his name again? The our Revolution endorsed candidate
is Tim Burns.
Tim Burns.
Burns. Yeah, you were talking about him yesterday on your. I think it was yesterday on your show about how he was being. He wouldn't fill out the form for the NRA.
Oh, yeah.
And you actually mentioned him in your show yesterday as a candidate for the.
Oh, interesting.
I think it was yesterday when you were talking about that. And there is another more Democratic-leaning candidate as well, and then one very strong conservative who actually helped design the redistricting maps. So we got to try to even us out. We're 5-2 right now, and anyhow, working hard to get people out to vote today.
If you're in Wisconsin, get out today and vote.
Get out today and vote. It won't take you long. There won't be long lines anywhere. So the weather is a hindrance, but take your umbrella or whatever. So,
well, people in Wisconsin know how to deal with weather.
You betcha.
I mean, I grew up in Michigan. Weather's, we laugh at weather in the Midwest, in the upper Midwest.
Yes, we do.
Okay, Sue, I got to run, but thanks for the heads up. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Thanks for the platform, Tom. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Sue. I appreciate the call. Colin in Kirkland, Washington. Hey, Colin. Predatory capitalism?
Yes, I just wanted to kind of talk about how this rising epidemic here in the last few years of these, mass shootings and the school shootings, how that's being directly affected by this American system of predatory capitalism, where basically, we have now multiple generations that are growing up with no sense of hope for any sort of economic prosperity in the future, and we have these kids growing up who realize that they're never going to be able to afford college. They're never going to be able to start a family. They're never going to be able to buy a home. And, obviously, the depression and other mental issues are obviously a factor as well. But it kind of just makes me wonder how maybe this sense of hopelessness and downright sense of anger is kind of the way that these kids and young adults are like lashing out and rebellion, and that kind of also ties into what one of your other callers were saying earlier about how we also need to look at how these kids and young people are being affected by these SSRI drugs, which, like you said, it kind of kills their sense of empathy to where they don't really see or understand the consequences of taking the life of another person.
Or taking their own lives, for that matter. Suicide is the big risk that is black box labeled on most SSRI drugs. This increases the risk of suicide, which is the same thing. I mean, it's homicide of self, but and it comes and people will do it because they've lost connection to the friends and family that they're going to wound so badly by taking their own lives. But yeah,
right. And yeah, there's also certainly a social disconnect too, where again, we now have multiple generations of people that they put more value in the number of Facebook likes that they have and the number of retweets they get on Twitter than actual human face-to-face social interaction. So, right. I mean, that's obviously a part of it. But I guess to kind of wrap it up, back to the predatory capitalism, something that a lot of people don't realize is that Franklin D. Roosevelt, he prided himself, well, I'm sure your audience knows this, but many other people out there don't. FDR, he prided himself in saving capitalism by basically convincing the mega wealthy that in order for them to stay wealthy and keep most of their wealth, they would have to give up a very small fraction of their wealth so that the collective good can, start to prosper again.
You're right.
And I was kind of wondering, if you had any sort of ideas as to, like, in today's day and age, how do we convince these mega rich people like Jeff Bezos and Zuckerberg and even the executives at the corporations? How do we convince them that we're basically we're driving full steam ahead to a cliff and we don't have any brakes on
This is right. This is why I wrote the book Crash of 2016, which lays out that whole scenario and how we got here from the Powell memo forward and what it was like in the 1920s and the whole fourth turning scenario of every 80 years. We have another Great Depression and war. And what I suggested in that book, the title of which is poorly timed, but I think the event is still on its way. What I suggested in the Crash of 2016 is that it's going to take another Great Depression. When Franklin Roosevelt came into office, a third of America was out of work. On the week that he was inaugurated, March 4th, 1933, all the banks in America, the last remaining 10 or 20% of the banks, failed. So he presided over an absolute screaming disaster. And that gave him the power to do these things. So it's really important who's in the White House when this happens. We'll be back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
In a way, I mean, it was actually Herbert Hoover who was in the White House when the great crash first happened. If Donald Trump is in the White House, it scares me.
We're reading today from Jesse Eisinger's new book, shall we call it the Chicken Poop Club? Why the Justice Department Fails to Prosecute Executives. This is from the introduction. It's from page 15 in the introduction. Boom, bust, and crackdown. America's economic history is unfolded in a series of booms, followed by busts, followed crucially by crackdowns. After the stock market crash of 1929, congressional hearings channeled public outrage and resulted in landmark laws regulating Wall Street and creating the Securities and Exchange Commission in 1934. A few years later, The new SEC helped put the head of the mighty New York Stock Exchange in prison. Though inconsistent, the SEC over the intervening decades emerged as one of the most respected government regulatory bodies. The SEC is the most important corporate regulator, overseeing publicly traded companies in the nation's capital markets, money markets. The agency has civil powers, must team up with the various offices of the Justice Department when a securities laws violation turns into a criminal investigation. After the go-go years of the late 1960s, the SEC worked closely with the Southern District to take on top law firms, top accounting firms, and top executives who had helped perpetrate corporate frauds. After the savings and loan scandals of the 1980s, when hundreds of small banks across the country failed due to reckless real estate loans, the Department of Justice prosecuted over 1,000 people, including top executives of many of the largest failed banks. After the Michael Milken-run junk bomb boom and blow-up of the late 1980s, prosecutors spent years digging up evidence of stock manipulation and insider trading at major investment banks and law firms, prosecuting some of the most powerful Wall Street figures of the era. In the early 2000s, the NASDAQ bubble burst. The burst NASDAQ bubble revealed a corporate book-cooking pandemic. Top officers from giants such as Enron, WorldCom, Quest Communications, Adelphia, and Tyco International ended up in prison. Recklessness and stupidity fuel booms, but usually so do crimes. By contrast, after the 2008 financial crisis, the government failed. In response to the worst calamity to hit capital markets and the global economy since the Great Depression, the government did not charge any top bankers. The public was furious. Bank bailouts and a lack of consequences for banksters radicalized both ends of the political spectrum and gave rise to two of the most potent social movements of our time, Tea Party and Occupy Wall Street. Anger about the lack of Wall Street accountability seeded disenchantment with Obama. The 2016 insurgency of Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, who challenged frontrunner Hillary Clinton almost to the doors of the Democratic Convention, demonstrated the anger that remained on the left years after the apex of the crisis, undergirding mistrust about Clinton. She had given friendly, fateful, and highly compensated speeches to investment banks. While a Republican president had presided over the crisis and a Democratic one had saved the financial system, Hillary Clinton, Obama, and the Democrats could not claim to be the protectors of the working class and the scourges of investment bankers. That was due in large measure to the lack of corporate prosecutions. According to the Wall Street Journal, analysis of 156 criminal and civil cases brought by the Justice Department, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and the Commodity Futures Trading Commission against 10 of the largest banks on Wall Street since 2009, in 81% of the cases, the government neither charged nor even identified individual employees. In the remainder, the government only charged 47 low and mid-level employees. Merely one was a boardroom-level executive whom the SEC charged civilly rather than criminally. In his own incoherent and superficial ways, Donald Trump rode anger about Wall Street throughout his campaign, railing at the bank's power. He closed his campaign by hinting poisonously about a cabal of global bankers rigging the system. He assailed politicians who were owned by Goldman Sachs, Trump's word. His first Ted Cruz in the primary and then Hillary Clinton in the general. The Republican platform called for breaking up the big banks by returning to the Glass-Steagall Act, the Depression-era law that splits commercial bank from investment banking, a reflection of resentment about the government bailout of the financial system as the bankers wriggled free. No sooner had Trump taken office, though, than he rushed to stuff members of that cabal into his White House and cabinet. He and Goldman alumni who advised him moved within days of taking office to unravel Dodd-Frank and loosen restrictions on corporations generally. It's commonplace to observe that no top bankers from the top financial firms went to prison for the widespread malfeasance that led to the 2008 financial crisis. It's such a socially acceptable opinion that no less than an inside-the-beltway figure than the former chairman of the Federal Reserve, Ben Bernanke, said after he was safely out of office that more bankers should have gone to prison. The problem is worse than that. Today's Justice Department has lost the will and indeed the ability to go after the highest level corporate wrongdoers. The problem did not begin in the aftermath of the 2008 crash, and it has not ended. Prosecutors don't simply struggle to put executives for too big to fail banks in prison. They also cannot hold accountable wrongdoing executives from a gamut of large corporations, from pharmaceutical to technology, to large industrial operations, to retail giants. And, you know, the book goes on from there, laying out exactly who and how and why. It's extraordinary. The Chicken Beep Club.
Any place you want. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. I'm seeing, you know, I had somebody call and say that they were going to participate in the National School March, National School Walkout in April. I'm seeing posters for one on March 24th in Washington, D.C. I think that that's probably well defined. And another one for March 14th, the National School Walkout, which would be about a month from now. I'm not sure exactly what, you know, sometimes you get groups that are you know, putting these things out just, you know, to try to confuse people. I just, you know, I'm going to try and verify each one of these dates, who's doing it, how they're doing it, and what the whole story is. Reginald in Piscataway, New Jersey. Hey, Reginald, what's up? Thanks for listening to Sirius XM.
Okay, Tom, how you guys doing?
Good. What's up?
Good. I'm a first-time caller to your show, and I just want to let you know that I appreciate, you know, your platform.
Thank you.
There was a kid that called in from, I believe, from Long Island, New York, regarding advice about what advice would you give them to take on this fight with the NRA and so forth. And I just want to say I will be at the march with my son and my wife. But some of the advice that I would have to say is that just know who you're going up against. Stay strong. Be committed to what you're doing, because you can see the attack on these kids, you know, all through the right wing media as we speak.
Yep.
And that just lets me know, Tom, that these kids are gaining traction. They're gaining their movement. It's turning into a movement. And the fact that the media is dogging these kids and talking about them in such a negative way, it just lets me know just how powerful these kids really are. And I just want to say to them, stay strong. And I'm in your corner, and I believe a lot of us is in your corner, and we will definitely be supporting you guys. That's all I want to say, Tom.
Well said, Reginald. I completely agree. And yes, you're right. The Fox propaganda channel is already cranking up criticisms of these young people, and there will be a whole lot more to come.
Thing, Tom?
Sure.
There was I believe on CNN this morning there was some ex-congressman. I think he's from Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
And he really denigrated these kids. He wanted to know, how can these kids logistically come together and do this? Okay, and he just tore these poor kids apart. But again, like I said, we're all with you guys, and please just keep doing what you're doing, because this transcends race, and we all need to be in this together.
Yeah, I agree. And this, Nicole, I just retweeted her tweet. She said, the same people who said 13 and 14-year-olds were perfectly mature enough to date Roy Moore are now saying 17 and 18-year-olds are too immature to have opinions on gun control. You know, it's just bizarre. Fox propaganda channel can try to have it, you know, 16 ways, however they want on, you know, particular days of the week. But I think Americans are waking up to the BS that they're selling. Reginald, thank you for the call. Kristen in Camas, Washington. Hey, Kristen, what's up?
Well, snow. How about you?
Pardon?
I said snow. And
oh, snow, yeah. It's snowing here in Portland, too. So what's up, Kristen?
It's crazy. Well, I wanted to say I have 2 teenage daughters, and I think that these...
Kristen, you sound really faint. Is there any chance you could take me off speakerphone so I could hear you?
Yeah, hold on.
Okay, is that better?
That is a world of better, yes.
Okay. I have 2 teenage daughters. They go to Camas High School. Now, granted, we live in a really liberal area, but the GOP, they are underestimating these kids in such a way that it's going to bite them in the butt.
Yep.
These kids have never, ever lived without war. And they have a very, very strong sense of justice and injustice. They don't care about someone's color, race, creed, sexuality. They don't care about that. They care about who people are, and they're very, very informed.
Yes.
They are the most informed generation. And I'm telling you right now, if you think women in pussy hats is something that's to be a threat, a teenager with a cell phone, these kids know how to network better than anybody on the planet.
Yeah.
That's what they do. That's how they've grown up.
Yep. I'm totally with you.
They're absolutely underestimating our kids.
Yeah.
And I think they're underestimating the parents who are backing our kids because we don't want our kids to be killed.
Yeah, totally with you.
These kids are savvy.
Yep. Kristen, thank you. Thank you for the call. Louise, you said Sherrod Brown is on the line. I don't see his name on the board. Is it the one that's labeled Sunday? 10. Line 10. Yeah, okay, there we go. Senator Sherrod Brown.
I can hear you, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't see your name on our board. Brown.senate.gov is the website. You can tweet him at Sen, S-E-N, as in Senator Sherrod, 2 R's, Sherrod Brown. Senator, it's been a while since we've talked. It's great having you back. I understand that you and some of your colleagues are fighting this effort by Republicans and a couple of Democrats, tragically, to deregulate our banks back to where they were in 2007.
So, the banks didn't do any damage to the country a decade ago. So, I mean, it really is, what's phenomenal is the collective amnesia in the banking committee and even among some Democrats and on the Senate floor and on the House floor on what happened into banks and what happened to our economy.
Is it amnesia, or is it that the banks are spreading cash around?
Well, it's okay. Maybe it's really all of that. I mean, it's like anything in life. You could convince yourself of a lot of things, and I think the money that particularly Wall Street is spread around to a lot of members of Congress helps them have their thinking evolve into, well, if we could, there's no reason we don't have to have these tough rules on banks. I mean, this whole view of deregulation. I mean, I'm riding in a car right now, and I'm in Toledo, and I'm in a Jeep Cherokee, and about 2 years ago, this same car, it's not the same car, the same model, guy hit me going 40 miles an hour, ran a stop sign, knocked us 30 feet because of, frankly, because of government regulations with seat belts and airbags and reinforced steel. None of us in our car were hurt, including my dog in the back seat.
Wow.
And that's because of government rights. It's because of I think it's good union workers on these that built this Jeep in Toledo, but it's also government regulations. And the same with Wall Street. I mean, whether it's clean air or safe drinking water or consume auto safety, the bank made this banking system and
yeah, Senator, your phone is breaking up pretty badly. I don't know if you can stand someplace else or move. Or... Hello?
Is it better now, Tom?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry. And because of, Dodd-Frank made this banking system safer, clearly, and made it safe, brought consumer protections. And Republicans in the Senate want to emasculate that and want to go back to prior to the banking crisis. And it's just criminal almost.
Yeah, I completely agree. We've got about 2 minutes to a hard break here, Senator. What can people who are listening or watching right now do?
Well, people can write their members of Congress and say, don't vote for the CRAPO, C-R-A-P-O bill. They can come on my website, SherrodBrown.com, and sign our petition saying work for the American people, not for the banks, demanding Congress work for us, not for Wall Street, at SherrodBrown.com. We are building. I've been on the phone all week, the last week, with colleagues of mine in the Senate saying vote no. I think we're going to probably lose in the first round, but I think people are starting to listen. Former regulators, people like Paul Volcker and Sheila Bair, both parties are saying this is a bad bill, and it's going to take us back to the days which weren't exactly the good old days.
The flip side of that would be passing a clear, affirmative, functional modern version of Glass-Steagall. Do you have any hope for something like that?
Yeah, I don't have hope right now that we're going to do positive things. I just want to stop. I want to play defense effectively and stop them from rolling back bad things. But I think that we win on this. We will help build momentum. That's why I ask you to come to SherrodBrown.com, sign this petition saying you don't work for the banks, you work for the American public. Then we turn that corner and we start winning on more of these. But this Congress, it's like the gun lobby is so powerful in this Congress with Republican leadership. So is the bank lobby, the Wall Street lobby, and we got a lot of work to do.
Senator, we just have 20 seconds here. There's an election for president coming up, and your name is being mentioned more and more frequently. Any thoughts on that 2020 election?
I don't have much thoughts on that. I love the job I'm doing. I don't really have interest in it. I just don't think of myself as doing that. I want to stay in the Senate and fight for workers and be a strong progressive voice in the industrial Midwest. That's what I aspire to and what I want to do.
Yeah. Well, I absolutely support your being in the Senate. I think you're one of our greatest senators. I think you'd make a hell of a president too, but I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you for saying that, but we'll move on. Your time's run out.
There you go. Senator Sherrod Brown. Senator, thanks so much for calling in the program today.
See ya.
It's always good to talk to you. The door is always open. Senator Sherrod Brown, his website, SherrodBrown.com or brown.senate.gov. You can tweet him at SenSherrod. 2 R's, S-E-R-R-O-D, Brown, B-R-O-W-N, S-E-N like senator. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
45 minutes past the hour, back with more of your calls right after this. Welcome back. Nora in Seattle, listening on KBCS. Hey, Nora, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Hey, I really was listening to your conversation with Joe about where he was asking advice on some tactics, and I liked your response. And one suggestion I have is that we co-opt the language and the tactics of the pro-life, sanctity of life movement, including, instead of having smiling senior portraits and Facebook faces of the dead children, of showing the crime scene photos in front of the Congress, on the steps of Congress. And I was interested in knowing what you know about access to crime scene photos and how that might work.
The various police departments and federal agencies that have access to the photos from the various mass shootings from Vegas to Newtown to Parkland, et cetera, are unanimous in not wanting these to be in the public. The most frequently used excuse is that it's disrespectful to the dead or to the families of the dead, or it'll re-traumatize the families of the dead. I wasn't hearing anybody say that when they were showing 9/11 on a continuous loop for months in the run-up to the war in Iraq. You know, these kinds of images, the images of people dying, it's or dead, is very, very powerful stuff. It ended the war in Vietnam. It could end this gun carnage. And I would love to see these students rename their they've named their mission Never Again. I would love to see them also consider using right to life. You know, don't we have a right to life? I mean, the right to life movement, or the pro-life movement, they were called both, prior to 1973 was entirely the anti-death penalty movement. If you said in 1972, or even 73 or 74, I mean, it took a couple of years before the anti-abortion people appropriated these terms. If you were to have said in the late 60s, early 70s that you remember the right to life movement, that you were pro-life, everybody immediately understood you were one of those people who opposed the death penalty. And there was a strong movement across the country for it. The death penalty got taken over and taken down in a number of states. It was taken down at the federal level for a while because of the pro-life movement. Then it got put back up again. And, you know, this is a pro-life movement, and I would love to see these kids appropriate that phrase as well. There's so many great memes floating around that they could be using. I mean, the never again is a good one, too. We'll see where it goes, and it's up to them. It's not up to me, but you know, yeah.
It's up to them. And I also want to thank you for the rage I heard in your voice coming from your heart last week when this started to happen. I still feel it. I want us all not to lose touch with the rage and disgust.
Yeah, I am seriously angry at these people, these pathetic pretend politicians who take millions of dollars, you know, the Tom Tillises of the world, the Richard Burrs of the world, the Rob Portmans of the world, the Ron Johnsons of the world, take millions of dollars from the NRA, and then, you know, like sniveling cowards, oh, we send our thoughts and prayers, oh, there's nothing we can do. These people are pathetic excuses for human beings, and they do not deserve to be in elective office. And the American people, the American public is waking up, and we're saying enough already. We are sick and tired of this stuff. Nora, thank you. Very well said. Thank you so much. Great to hear from you. And thanks for listening to KBCS. We'll be right back. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. It's 10 minutes before the hour. Casey in West Palm Beach, Florida. Hey, Casey, what's on your mind today?
Tom, how you doing, buddy?
Good.
Good. You know, I really hope the Democrats have a winning lottery ticket right now, Tom, and I can't tell you how happy I am. They have another chance to get the voter, and I hope they don't blow it, because they did not do any outreach to millennials and even these young 17-year-olds that are going to be turning 18. So I'm in Florida. I'm not far from Parkland. I'm an hour away. And these kids want somewhere to go to. They want not necessarily a party, but they want to be part of a platform that they can believe in. And I hope the Democrats do not take them advantage of them. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, they took advantage of the progressive vote in the last decade. And I'm just hoping they do the right thing and you know what I'm saying, right, Tom? I mean, I do,
and the main way that these kids, because we're talking a single issue here rather than the broad spectrum of issues that some have got co-opted, some didn't by the factions within the Democratic Party in 2016. I think that if they can succeed in turning the NRA into a toxic boogeyman, so that Democratic politicians in particular will want to have absolutely nothing to do with the NRA, and then spread that across the Republican political sphere so that more and more Republican politicians will be afraid to say, yes, I take money from the NRA. And having a high NRA rating becomes a badge of shame. Yeah, I don't know if you've noticed, Bernie Sanders is running around going, the NRA rated me a D or an F or whatever it was, an E. You know, they don't like Bernie. I mean, he has voted with them a couple of times, but they were not for reasons that had to do with supporting the NRA. And you know, it just has to be a badge of shame. It has to be a scarlet letter.
Right, but what I'm trying to say is that the Democrats need to start doing outreach.
Yes,
okay?
I agree.
That's what they did not do, because they knew that young voters were not going to vote for Hillary. Yep. Okay, they knew that and that's the thing now, is they have an opportunity, and they better not try to take advantage of this situation. They needed to be genuine. They needed to do the right thing. They needed to drop yes.
They need to put forward specific policy recommendations and coalesce around them. Like my thing of, you know, license guns as cars and deal with guns like cars, number one. And number two, let's consider dropping semi-automatic weapons into the same category as automatic weapons in terms of how hard it is to get a permit to buy them. You know, if they would just do those two things, and I just, you know, wrote a piece about this and sent it off to Alternate. I don't know if they're going to publish it or not, but, you know, if they would just do those two things, I think that they would have a heck of a lot of people on board. But you're absolutely right, Casey, and very well said. Casey, I got to move along to the next caller, but thank you for the call. Rudy in Atlanta, Georgia. Hey, Rudy, what's up?
Hey, Tom, how you doing?
I'm well. What's on your mind?
I'm going to say this. I always tell the kids that education sometimes is an inconvenience, and I hope and I pray that these kids take the opportunity to learn not only history, but learn the Constitution. Take time to learn what's actually going on in this country and start learning about how the American learn how America works.
Yeah.
This is, you know, I tend to look at the glass half full. This is a perfect opportunity for these kids, for the leaders of tomorrow, to really understand this country and the history of this country. You know, Tom, look at here. This just didn't happen in a vacuum. You know, The beauty of this tragedy, Tom, is for these kids to take control of their future. That is the true beauty of what's happening right now. These kids, and I'll tell you, I have a 20-year-old in the Air Force. I'm going to tell you, Tom, my daughter runs circles around me when it comes to the computer. And I agree with these people when they say, I don't think the NRA understands what they're up against. These kids are brilliant.
I agree.
And I'm so, and the beauty of this, Tom, is I hope that this wakes these kids up, because up until then, I don't think they really had anything to really grab onto. I hope they grab onto this, Tom, and I hope they really give it to these people.
I suspect, Rudy, there's not a high school in America that isn't going through this kind of change. I've had MSNBC on the monitor here all throughout the show, and keep waiting to see if they're going to show pictures of the Palm Beach, I believe it is, high school that just dumped out 1,000 students, just walked out to walk down to Parkland. Haven't seen anything so far, which doesn't mean it wasn't there. I might have missed it. But I am hoping that more and more high schools become these hotbeds of activism, as so many did back in the late 60s, early 70s around the Vietnam War. And
I think a storm is coming. I think a storm is coming, and I think that, hey, these kids are about to wake up, and it's not about color. It's not about none of these silly things that us grown-ups tend to talk about. These kids, if they can stick together and stay focused, they can really change their future. And that's what I hope they do.
I agree.
Tom, I love you. Enjoy your evening.
Thanks, Rudy. I really appreciate your kind words. It's great to hear from you, and thanks for listening to SiriusXM. Ray in McHenry, Illinois. Hey, Ray, what's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Tom. I got a quick suggestion for Joe and any kids in marches. Create T-shirts and wear T-shirts that say on the front, I can vote this year, or I can vote in 2019, or I can vote in 2020.
Right.
Emphasize the vote. And then on the back, they say, I will count on it.
Yeah.
And they should wear those every time they march. And the other thing I really suggest, having been a retired teacher, the only thing these guys are going to really listen to, especially at the national level, a nationwide strike. Shut the whole education system down and stay out until they do something. Because otherwise, you're just going to wait them out. That's what they're going to do. Yeah. You can count on it. And the other thing I would do if they get this march in Washington is just do the same thing they do for 9/11. You know, cordon off an area and then get the list of all the kids who died in schools because of guns, and just read them off one at a time. Maybe with a sound effect of a gun each time, and have some kid drop to the ground, and just make a real great visual for that.
Now that's a brilliant. I was talking about we need good theater. That is brilliant theater. That's brilliant, Ray. Thanks for calling, and thanks for sharing that suggestion. We're hitting the end of the show here. My apologies to everybody else on hold. We'll be back tomorrow with more of the same. But in the meantime, as this movement grows, as we all watch it grow, as many of us participate in it, as all of us want to support it, as GoFundMe pages are appearing, both to deal with the medical expenses of these kids, but also this movement, it's time to step up. Get out there, get active. Democracy is not a spectator sport. Tag, you're it. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.